Reading, oh, yeah, very good. We are just waiting for the live streaming to begin, folks, so just stand by. Okay, very good. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I'll go around the room and do some introductions. Mr. Florence, Mrs. Holbrook, Mrs. King, Mike Dolan, Mr. Hammond, Dr. Prewandowski, Mr. Gelfi. On the line, we have several administrators, principals, also Mr. Swenson, Ms. Richards, there's Mr. Marrera. Mr. Marrera is also a member of the school committee. So we'll get started with our meeting. I will begin with asking for a motion for the approval of the minutes from January 27th, 2021.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mrs. Holbrook. We have a second. Second by Mr. Hammond. Any discussion about the minutes? Seeing none, this does require a roll call vote. Mr. Florence. Aye. Mr. Gelfi.
Aye.
Mr. Hammond. Aye. Mrs. Holbrook.
Aye.
Mrs. King.
Aye.
Mr. Marrera.
Aye.
Dr. Prewandowski.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Thank you very much. We have our minutes. Up next, we have public comment. But before we begin public comment tonight, I want to speak directly to the students on this call and the students who might be watching via YouTube. Tonight, you may hear from members of the community who speak passionately with regards to the topics before the committee. Please know that this is part of civic engagement and we welcome hearing the wishes and ideas of our constituents. This is what makes our system of government what it truly is, the people's government. As an elected group of volunteers, we will always do what we feel is in the best interest of our students. So with that said, the school committee welcomes information, concerns, opinions, and of those attending this meeting. In order to give those wishing time to comment, a fair opportunity to speak, ensure compliance with open meeting law and other obligations, and avoid disruption of the meeting, the committee will not engage with the speaker or with one another in deliberation on comments as they are presented during comment period. At its discretion, the school committee may schedule issues raised by the speaker for deliberation at a further meeting. The chair will now open the public comment for a period of 15 minutes per policy BEDH and would ask anyone who wishes to speak to raise their hand virtually through Zoom, obviously, and provide your name, the town you reside, and please keep your comments to 3 minutes. Anyone wishing to speak this evening? Just scrolling through the list of attendees.
Should be on.
They should show up. I'll call for public comment one more time. Oh, there we go. I can't see that far.
Aaron Fisher.
Okay, Ms. Fisher?
Hello, school committee. Thank you so much for listening. I just want to speak to the recent changes. I did watch Governor Baker's and Commissioner Riley's meeting yesterday. I'd also like to speak to my own children and the work their teachers are doing. I think they are doing an incredible job. And I've had 3 children in this district. My oldest are in 4th, my youngest is in 2nd. I have one on an IEP, I have one on an ICAP, and I have teachers that have always worked with me throughout their experience. And I'm not always the easiest parent. I am very involved, and they have nearly stood on their heads to educate my children. And I am very fortunate. My children do well in school and they love learning. They love learning now too, even with the hybrid and the remote situation. And you're doing a phenomenal job orchestrating that. But I would just like to point out that they have never once, a teacher has never once said to me, I can't. And we have crossed a lot of hurdles. And I think the teachers really deserve that pat on the back. And also you know, the teachers of BR have always stood on their head and gone out of their way to educate my children. And never once have they said, we can't do it. And so I think that's, as a community, what we need to do. We cannot say we can't do it. I am a full-time school teacher myself in East Bridgewater, as you know. We are in the process of going back full-time pending teacher vaccination, and we are educating our children. We have filled our desks. We have many that are in 4 days. We have made it a priority to bring back high needs kids, and we have never said I can't. And I think our children in BR need us to say I can, and we need to try to do that for them. And that's all I'd like to say. And I thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher. Mr. Shaw, you can call the next.
Up next, we have Laura Conrad.
Ms. Conrad?
Yes, thank you. I would like to say thank you to the school committee members and the superintendent for allowing public comment at the beginning of the meeting. I think it's incredibly important to hear from the community. I would also like to thank the teachers for their dedication and the hard work that they have done. They've probably worked harder this year than any other year. And I can say I have 3 children in the district. I live in Raynham, and all 3 of my children's teachers have been phenomenal in trying to support them in this really challenging time. I also would like to say is as a parent, I have been very vocal. I am frustrated. There is no clear plan or metrics to kind of tell us what it's going to take to get our kids back to school full time, or even not even full time, and more in-person time that they have today. I am just curious of, you know, what it will take, what changes need to happen versus where we are today come fall, because come fall, we still are going to have space issues. In addition, I know it's been raised before by some of the school committee members, is, you know, I am also just curious and frustrated why we are not in person alternating even full day on Wednesdays. It is nowhere negotiated with the union that we cannot be in school on Wednesdays. And I know from the school committee and different folks, it was said that this was a superintendent's decision. So I would just ask that the school committee consider how can we increase in-person time for our students between now and the end of the school year. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Conrad. Anyone else wishing to speak during public comment?
Kim Lanigan.
Ms. Lanigan? Ms. Lanigan, we see your hand, but we cannot hear you.
Up next, we have Patricia Wagner.
Hi, thank you so much. And I want to just first of all say thank you to all the hard work that everyone is doing on the school committee. Thank you to the superintendent, and thank you to all the hardworking teachers out there who are really putting forth a lot of effort. I would like to echo a lot of what Ms. Conrad said in regard to a plan and the metrics to get our kids back to school. So my hope is for a transparent plan with target dates of what we foresee happening. I know that spacing is an issue and busing is an issue. Teachers, and maybe, you know, because some teachers are remote, that we need more teachers teaching. But what will the metrics be for getting our kids back to school? And what is the target date? Do we see it this year? My stressor is that in the fall, we'll still be in the same position, and that we won't have a plan working forward with target dates. So I would like to see that more of a transparent plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wagner. So folks, we've heard from 3 folks who share that same opinion. If there is anyone who would like to add something different, please feel free to do so. If you have the same information or same request that Ms. Fisher, Ms. Conrad, and Ms. Wagner have made. I would just ask you to potentially send us an email. This way we give everyone a chance to speak tonight. We know there are a lot of people here on the call, so we would appreciate that.
Mr. Paul Bailu?
Yes, good evening. Now, while I will say my comments do echo similar to the prior commenters, I don't know that just waving off everybody else who has a similar concern is appropriate, because I think it's important that the weight of the wave of that opinion is actually felt by the board. But that said, more than just focusing on the fall, I think we need to focus on even a bit sooner on having a plan to make a difference in getting more in-person time. I have 2 students in the district right now, one who's on an IEP and who is currently going to school full-time, who, if they weren't doing that, it would be catastrophic. Now, I think the board has recognized that those kids on the spectrum or with substantive IEPs absolutely needed it. But you know what? They're not the only kids who do. And I think that couldn't be stated enough. And I understand that teachers are working hard, but you know what? Everybody is. So it's not to diminish the work of the teachers, but let's not make more of it than it is. Everybody's working in COVID. Those kids that never took a day off down at Walmart, that never took a day off over at Shaw's, that didn't get to mail it in for half of their year with pay. So I don't think that we should throw laurels where in an area where everybody's pulling on the rope. I mean, and I'm not suggesting they're not. They are, and they're doing a good job, and they are pulling on the rope. But there's a lot of people standing beside them pulling on the rope too. I think that it can't go loudly said enough that we're keeping the people who are at least risk in the most seclusion, causing them the most damage in the absence of connection, which is their most dire need. Their most dire need. As adults, we go to work and we do things, we interact with some minor interaction with people because we've already developed a lot of those connections, social relationships, and all that stuff, and the skills to make them. These kids are learning how to be friends, how to make friends, how to interact with peers. I just think that it can't be stated loudly enough that mathematics, although near and dear to my own personal heart, is not the only thing that school is for. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Let's give Kim Lanigan another shot.
Ms. Lanigan, can you hear us?
Okay, sorry for the technical difficulties I was having here. I'm on my work computer and it didn't really like Zoom for me. So I do appreciate the time. I really appreciate the fact that you guys moved the commentary to the beginning for the parents. I applaud you for doing that. I know that you've received a gazillion emails in the last couple of weeks, and I appreciate the response from the school committee as well as the superintendent. With that being said, I am still concerned with the fact that I am from Raynham. I have a 8th grader and a 9th grader. On half days, they're done by 10 a.m. The cameras are not on Monday through Friday. When they're home working, there's a check-in, then the cameras go off, a lot with the teachers. I just don't understand why we're still at this point where cameras aren't necessary and teachers are not teaching in person. And guys, I am not slamming teachers. I would never want to be in your position. I cannot imagine how difficult it is. But as a working parent, it's incredibly difficult on us as well. I am self-employed as my husband is, so we're very fortunate that we can be home with our children, even though they're on the older side. I have one on an IEP and one that is just suffering from isolation and whatnot. I cannot imagine being a parent who has to be out of the house, who's, a medical provider, works at Walmart, whatever have you. We are doing the best that we can. I hope that you guys don't take this as me being complaining, but the fact that Wednesdays are still half day, it's not in the teacher's contract, don't understand it. I've shared with Mr. Swenson that, I see things on social media, I see teachers out and about. I get the fact that they have completely had to readapt and relearn how to teach our children. And for that, I applaud. The fact that we're still half days is mind blowing to me. I'd also just like to ask, and I know you guys cannot comment on it, but the city right next to us, Taunton, is working on a summer program for the kids who have fallen behind. I think the smartest of kids we're losing, and I think kids who are on our IEPs we're losing. I think it's a really, really terrible, it's almost, I don't want to call it a lost year, because in this past year, since my children have been home, I've been able to spend much more time with them than I would have otherwise. And for that, I am incredibly thankful. However, my kids' education is definitely falling behind, and I just don't know what I can possibly do. I'm not a teacher. I don't pretend to be one. I don't know what I can do to help catch them up from this past year, but I would love to see a summer program where our kids are in school.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
And the last person that we'll hear from tonight.
Robertson Taylor.
Hello, hi, it's actually Karen Robertson, her mother. I just want to say, I'll go along with what Kim said. I still don't understand these half days on Wednesday. And I also applaud the teachers for trying to get this job done in this situation. But I also too, I'm a healthcare worker. I'm on the front lines. I was on the front lines. We went to work every single day in the midst of everything. There's other states back to school right now, full time. I grew up in Michigan, and most schools there are back full time, and a lot of them have been back full time since November. The school I went to is about equal size as Bridgewater Raynham, and they're back to school. The principal there sent me pictures of what their school is doing in the lunchroom, how they have up the plexiglass, the kids are eating in the lunchroom. I just don't understand why we aren't at that point yet, and why Wednesdays our kids are still out at 10, and at the high school on the days they're home, they're checking in, and then that's it for them until they have to check in for the next class. So I guess I'm just reiterating the frustration. I have also a son on an IEP. He used to stay after school 3 days a week. I know there's online help now, but it's not the same as him getting hands-on in-person help. I don't know what to do for him too in his IEP, and I feel he's fallen behind. And also these kids socially, I mean, that's a huge part of it. We're seeing lots of kids at the hospitals with anxiety issues and emotional issues, and this distancing them and not having dances and not having sports and all these things that these kids should be doing are going to impact these children huge. And I think that should be looked at also. Thank you. Keep up the good work, but I would love to see us back to school.
Thank you very much. All right, folks, so that hits our 15-minute mark. Are the two people, are those two new raised hands?
Yes.
Okay, so this is what I'll do. We will hear from these two people that have their hands raised. Their names, please, Michael.
Aaron Hennessy and Mary Beth P.
P? Like the,
Not sure of the last name.
okay.
It's Mary Beth Pettit. Thank you.
All right. Actually, what we're going to do is we're going to hear from Aaron Hennessy first, and then from you, and that will conclude public comment for the night.
Hi, thank you so much for hearing me out. Just a really quick question, and it's not anything that pertains to the other subject, and I'm not for or against this. I just see questions on Facebook from other parents, and don't even know if you're going to be able to answer these questions tonight, but maybe putting it on for a future meeting. But the new turf that needs to be replaced, I was wondering, one, what deems turf unsafe? Just curious, parents want to know. And have we explored getting possibly, I don't know, old-fashioned grass? Is that cheaper? Did we explore that option? And, you know, no big deal if it can't be answered tonight, but those are just some questions that people had about that big expense. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hennessy. And then finally, Mary Beth, I'm sorry, your last name, I tried writing it down as you said it and I missed it, so.
That's okay. Its last name is Pettit. I just wanted to say I'm a teacher in a different district, and I guess I have a little bit of a different perspective. I worked on my district's reopening committee, and I know how hard it is to get kids back in the building. And I just want to make sure that everybody understands that we need to keep our staff and our students safe, and that should be the main priority. And I just want to say, I really thank you and the teachers for all that you have done. It is not easy to get these kids back in the building safely. There are different moving parts that we all have to deal with that a lot of the public is not aware of. So I just want to shout out and say kudos to all of you for keeping our kids and our staff safe. I think a key to getting everybody back into the building safely is to get our teachers vaccinated first. And I know we are down a building with the Mitchell being out of commission. And I just want people to think about that before we rush into something too quickly. I know that some districts are still fully remote. So I'm very happy that we've had our kids in a hybrid model for as long as we had. So keep up the good work and thank you for keeping our students safe.
Thank you, Ms. Pettit. And that will wrap up public comment for this evening. Folks, you can feel free to join us at our next meeting or reach out to us via email. As one of the speakers this evening said, we have received quite a few. So if you have something that you need to say to us, by all means, we're available via email as well. So having said that, we'll move on to correspondence and recognition. Mr. Swenson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Dolan. This evening, first we would like to acknowledge one of our Raynham Middle School students for the Patriot Pen Pal essay contest. She was the winner, and that is Ms. Lily Marrera. And with that, I would like to ask Mrs. Charette, the wonderful principal at RMS, to speak to Lily's accomplishment.
Thank you, Mr. Swenson. Good evening, Chairman Dolan, members of the school committee, and Mr. Swenson. On January 28th, we had the privilege of honoring Miss Lily Marrera, a grade 7 student at RMS who entered the VFW Post 2025 Patriots Pen Essay Contest. She was chosen the winner for the post and was honored by her classmates and Paul Laporte from the VFW via Google Meets. She received a certificate and a monetary prize for her essay entitled, "What Does Patriotism Mean to Me?" Her essay will be entered into the regional post contest where she will have the opportunity to win additional prizes. We are so proud of Lily and enjoyed hearing her essay, which she read for all of us that day. We wish her the best and as she awaits word on the next phase of the contest. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Charette. And congratulations, Lily. I know that she had another commitment this evening, but congratulations to her parents and family. And one of her parents is on our school committee. So Mr. Marrera, congratulations on Lily's behalf. Next, we have our marching band trip to Washington, D.C., which is very exciting. And I believe that our band director, Mrs. Sandra Medeiros, is on the line.
Hi, Mr. Swenson, I'm here.
How are you, Mrs. Medeiros? Could you tell us a little bit about this very exciting news?
Sure. So actually, Principal Watson received a letter that had an invitation from historic programs down in Washington, D.C., selecting the VR marching band to represent Massachusetts in their centennial celebration of the Lincoln Memorial next year down in Washington, D.C. And she actually received the letter first and was super excited and gave us a call. And I had no idea what she was talking about at first. And then I looked into it more, and it's due to our performance that we had down there 5 years ago when we took the band down there, and they enjoyed our performance and our group and wanted us back. So they offered us this invitation. And we are looking into it. It's super exciting. It was a great trip, 5 years ago for the kids. The kids who went down there still have incredible stories that they tell about it. And we were able to, we went to Arlington Cemetery, and we went to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, and we went to the Martin Luther King Memorial, and they learned a whole lot about that. And it was just an incredible thing to be down there and to play. So it's exciting that it's an opportunity that may happen again. And we're looking into doing it April of next year. And if that doesn't work, we would do it another year. But yeah, it's super exciting, and we're really happy to have received that invitation.
Well, kudos to all of our student musicians, and also kudos to you and all of the wonderful music teachers and within our music program, K-12. I think over the course of the last several years, what you've done to really build that program back at the high school is phenomenal. So thank you for all of your efforts. And thank you to all of our band parents as well for all of their support. They're incredibly supportive. The band, the junior music boosters, the music boosters at the high school. So we appreciate all of you. And with that being said, my understanding too would be that we would be the representatives from the Commonwealth. We'd be the only band down there representing Massachusetts.
Yes. So when we went 5 years ago, there were a few other bands from other states, but what they try to do is have one band from each state throughout their year of doing these festivals. So yes, we would be the only band from Massachusetts to go down there.
That's outstanding. So, well, thank you and congratulations to you and our kiddos. We're very proud.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that's all we have this evening under correspondence and recognition, Mr. Dolan.
Thank you, Mr. Swenson. Congratulations to Lily and Ms. Medeiros. Please keep the school committee apprised on any updates of that trip. If it's school vacation week, maybe some of us will take the drive down.
You are all welcome. Absolutely. Come on.
Moving on to educational reports. Mrs. Holbrook with the Student Advisory Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope all of the students enjoyed their well-deserved break. It's always a pleasure to hear from our wonderful Student Advisory Board. Our lives are different today in the midst of COVID, and our students have adapted. They will be reporting on these new activities that have been created, as well as new twists that they have put on the old ones. And first we'll hear from Libby.
Good evening, school committee. I'm Libby, and today I'll be talking about the Random Acts of Kindness and the Baby Picture Contest. So February is Random Acts of Kindness month, and VR School Climate Group is sponsoring a Random Acts of Kindness bingo through the month of February. Students participating fill out the bingo board as they complete tasks. Due to unusual circumstances this year, the school is spending more time focusing on students' wellness. So this year, the bingo board includes self-care as well as kindness towards others. Some examples of the boxes on the bingo board are to do a chore at home without being asked, email a teacher or coach with a compliment, and schedule time to do something relaxing. Students are encouraged to fill out the entire board, but to be entered in the prize drawing, they need to fill out 5 boxes in a row. 5 prizes, 1 from each grade and staff, are to be announced on March 2nd and 4th. We hope many students and staff participate in the bingo board to spread kindness to others and themselves. Teachers are having their classes participate in a contest of who can guess the most teacher baby pictures correctly. On Wednesdays, the school releases a Google form with baby photos of 3 teachers or staff members. Students are to guess which teacher could be the baby in the picture, and some pictures are far more difficult than others to determine the teacher. But it keeps the classes entertaining as we try to figure it out. Students debate on who each picture could be, allowing us to interact with one another in a fun and safe way through the Google Meets. They release the results later on in the week, and this contest is a fun and engaging way for students to have their classes on Wellness Wednesday. All right, on to Sarah.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sarah Pettit, and tonight I'll be speaking on the Class of 2021 fundraisers and the Rainwater Players. Although the senior class is looking a little bit different this year, the BR community is coming together in order to make the best out of the situation. Several parents have gathered their ideas in order to brainstorm some new fundraisers. Parents sold Super Bowl squares early in February and raised over $3,000 for the senior class. In addition, a senior poster contest is being held in which raffle tickets will be given out to any senior student who participates. These raffle tickets will be used to give out great prizes similar to those at the senior lock-in. Fundraising for scholarships is also occurring as well, and students can open up a special link to sell raffle tickets for the Dollars for Scholars program. As seniors, students can file for a guaranteed scholarship if they meet their fundraising goal. Thank you to the BR staff, faculty, and families for helping the class of 2021 make their last year in high school a memorable one. Despite not being able to hold a fall production, the Rainwater Players will be holding a modified musical in the spring. The show is set to be the well-renowned Grease. Auditions are set to occur after February break. Although nothing is set in stone yet, the BR community is very excited to see another fantastic performance from our own peers through Rainwater. And now on to Ian.
Thank you, Sarah.
Good evening. Tonight I'll be talking about Wellness Wednesdays and the NHS supply drive. So with the unusual circumstances that this school year has brought, many teachers have found a way to relieve a little bit of stress from students with Wellness Wednesdays. Since classes are so short, each Wednesdays, some teachers have their students participate in an inclusive group discussion about a chosen topic or question. Each student takes a turn in giving their input into the conversation. This exercise helps bring both cohort A and B students together, inviting students to have time to converse with peers and getting to know each other better. Something that's been a scarce opportunity in our current time. The National Honor Society is sponsoring a school supplies drive to benefit the local nonprofit schools on wheels from now through March 31st, 2021. Donations of new and unused school supplies, such as markers, pencil sharpeners, crayons, and other school supplies, can be brought to the boxes near the main office, outside of room F303 or D129. Lists of needed supplies are hanging up around the school, and anyone with questions can contact the NHS advisor, Mrs. Lindsay Kelleher. This concludes our February presentation. Thank you for allowing us the time and opportunity to come and speak to you tonight.
Thank you, Ian.
Mrs. Hoper?
No.
Okay, go ahead. Oh, you're good. Okay. Hey, Libby, can you send us that bingo board? I have a feeling we could use that at my house to do random acts of chores in my house. Up next, we have Bridging Lives Student Survey presentation. Mr. Powers.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Dolan, Mr. Swenson, members of the school committee. I am honored to introduce tonight, not an unfamiliar face. Ms. Peruccio has been here before, but Gabby Peruccio is from the High Point Treatment Center in Brockton, in the Brockton Area Prevention Collaborative. Gabby helps run our local prevention collaborative, Bridging Lives, which we've been fortunate to have many students come before you over the last few years and present on some of the remarkable things that they've done. Ms. Peruccio, in her role as grants manager, has been able to secure funding that has benefited our students, bringing different programs in with
Mr. Powers, I believe you may have frozen.
and she would like to share those results with you this evening. So I will turn it over to Gabby.
Thank you. You froze just for the last piece of your presentation, but I can fill in the dots.
All right, I'm sorry.
Thank you for having me. Again, I'm Gabby Peruccio. I work with the lovely coalition Bridging Lives that brings together many different school and community-based partners. And last year, we were able to survey students in grades 6, 7, and 8 on substance use prevention topics. And so I believe we're going to be sharing a PowerPoint that was shared, but if not, I can tell you what. There we go. So our department in High Point Treatment Center, we receive funding from the federal government to support underage drinking and marijuana prevention for Bridging Lives, and that covers the middle school students. We also have additional funding that can support high school age substance use prevention efforts. So I'll be discussing a little bit about that tonight, but I have the survey results for you all to see tonight from grades 6th, 7th, and 8th. And like I said, we receive funding for underage drinking and marijuana prevention, but a lot of the Bridging Lives work expands beyond that. And even the coalition, our youth coalition, Bridging Lives Peer Leaders, they've done so much work in the community around, you know, topics relevant to addiction, but they've targeted work around vaping prevention and healthy coping skills. And so they also were just awarded an amazing opportunity to expand their prevention efforts with the senior citizens in the community, working with the Council on Aging, and utilizing an interesting book, Hey Kiddo, to talk about really challenging topics around substance use, addiction, and family addiction, really for the most part. And so I just wanted to highlight that before we get into things. So last year in March, 1,162 middle school students were surveyed. And this data that I'm going to show you is, it's by grade level, but I'm going to highlight some cumulative points on what stood out. So the first point is 30-day use. So a student replies on the survey, how many times did they use a substance within the past 30 days? And so during the past 30 days, alcohol was the most used substance, with an average of 2% or 24 middle school students reporting drinking alcohol at least once within the past 30 days. And 23 middle school students reported using prescription drugs, and that's a prescription drug not prescribed to them. So that might not necessarily think of an opioid that we typically focus on, but also prescription drugs like ADHD medication and whatnot. So that pertains to all of those medications. And then 20 middle school students reported vaping, 14 students reported using marijuana, and 2% of students reported smoking cigarettes. You can go to the next slide, please. This question asked students, how much do you think young people risk harming themselves physically or in other ways if they use each of these substances? So it shows the percentage of students that think using the substance is of moderate to great risk. So those two measures are combined when we look at this data. And alcohol and marijuana were perceived as the least risky. So that showed that an average of all middle school students, 74%, or 859 and 865 respectively, of students reported using these substances poses a moderate to great risk. And then it's interesting actually to point out briefly that the sixth graders' perception of alcohol really kind of varied between grades and substances. So that was another one to point out. And cigarettes are viewed as the riskiest, with 88% of students reporting smoking cigarettes poses a moderate to great risk. This next point had students answer the question of how wrong do you think your parents would feel it would be for you to use each substance. So that was their perception of parental disapproval. And students reported parental disapproval of vaping at 99% and cigarettes at 99% as the highest. And then while students believed parental disapproval for marijuana was, and prescription drugs was the lowest. And they're all relatively fairly high for parental perceptions of harm, as you can see with those averages. And then the last set of questions was on peer disapproval. So how wrong do their friends feel it would be for them to use each substance? Students reported peer disapproval of cigarettes and prescription drugs as the highest. And then students believe peer disapproval for vaping at 86% and alcohol use at 87% was the lowest among the middle school students. So really that wraps up the highlights. But I do have a couple asks of the school committee and just a couple points to address. So our first ask is, I know tonight we got to share this with all of the people in attendance, but we would like to have your permission to share this with our coalition, and we use this data for strategic planning to work with our peer leaders to talk about current trends and how to inform their work. And then sometimes we can use this data on an aggregate basis in the community to do some social norming on campaigns. So that's my first ask of school committee.
Gabby, does anybody, I have an immediate question to that, Gabby.
Yep.
But does anybody else have any questions before we take that up? Okay, so I want to make sure that the data is just the data and not identifiable in any way?
Yep, so the data would be shared in a way that I just shared it with the people in attendance tonight. There would be no identifiable data. Even to me, I can't see any identifiable data except for gender, race, ethnicity, and those kinds of measures. So being shared to the community would be really in those percentages similar to what we shared tonight.
Okay. Any other questions?
Have we done this in the past with any of the surveys that they've provided us? Have we allowed them to share the data? I'm just curious.
Mr. Powers, I'll turn that question to you, sir. I don't know if you heard Dr. Krewandowski's question.
I did, yes. You know what? I would actually maybe defer to Gabby. I'm not sure if we've asked for this before to share. I think this might actually be the first time that we've requested this.
This is the first time we've ever surveyed students through our funding. And we do work with all of the surrounding school districts in our region, in our greater Brockton region. And they also have done this in the past. So we ask of school committee to share, and typically in all instances we do share, but it's normally in that like percentage style. So no identifiable measures, but not in the past, we haven't done this.
Other questions? Then to Gabby's request, I will entertain a motion to allow High Point Treatment to share the data with their consortium. So I have a motion by Dr. Krewandowski. Second. And a second by Mr. Gelfi. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Florence. Aye. Mr. Gelfi. Aye. Mr. Hammond. Aye. Mrs. Holworth.
Aye.
Mrs. King.
Aye.
Mr. Marrero.
Aye.
Dr. Krewandowski.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. You can do that. Gabby, go for it.
Thank you. Okay. My second ask is if we can survey students again this year in grades 6th, 7th, and 8th. Okay, that's the second ask, but the third ask is to expand it to the high school. So last year we received approval to just survey 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, but with our funding, we've increased our funding and we've been able to expand it to the high school if approved by school committee, and that would include grades 9, 11, and 12 just through our evaluation costs. That could be the 3 additional grades that we could survey if approved.
Mr. Powers or Mr. Swenson, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that request?
Yes, Chairman Dolan, we would definitely support that request. Again, the information in the projects that Bridging Lives and High Point bring into our district, and specifically at the high school with our Bridging Lives peer leaders, I think just trying to gather more information about our students and their experiences and challenges, I think will just benefit us in the long run and be able to provide possible other prevention, measures and programs. And so I think it is important, and I know I certainly don't want to speak for her because I know she's here, but Ms. Watson is a huge champion of Bridging Lives, all the peer leaders, and certainly High Point, as well as many of the faculty at the high school. Ms. O'Brien, Laura O'Brien is the advisor, but many of the administrators also sit in on those meetings, as do many of our community members attend those meetings as well. So it's definitely something that's supported across Bridgewater, Raynham, and so I would definitely endorse surveying those additional students.
Thank you. Ms. Watson, did you want to add anything?
I'll just quickly say thank you so much to Gabby and to Laura O'Brien. She really kind of spearheads everything on the high school front for us, but they have been exceptional to work with. They've provided us endless resources without even us asking. So they are a phenomenal partnership. So anything that they can do to help us, I am in full support of.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Watson. Okay, then I will entertain a motion to allow High Point and Bridging Lives to survey our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, along with our 9, 11, and 12th graders. Do I have a motion? So I have a motion by Mr. Hammond. Do I have a second? Second by Mrs. King. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Florence. Aye. Mr. Gelfi. Aye. Mr. Hammond. Aye. Mrs. Holworth.
Aye.
Mrs. King.
Aye.
Mr. Marrero.
Aye.
Dr. Krewandowski.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Survey away.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. We really appreciate the support.
All right, that concludes our educational reports. Now we are on to administrative and school committee reports, DPH COVID updates, boards of health, Mr. Tanis and Mr. Badger. I think I saw Mr. Tanis. There he is. I don't know if I saw Mr. Badger earlier, but Mr. Tanis, you could give us an update on what you're seeing in Raynham.
Sure, of course. Good evening, committee. So within Raynham, the past 3 to 4 weeks, we've been seeing a positive trend, or trending in the right direction with new cases, as well as the positivity percentage has decreased substantially. I unfortunately don't have the raw data yet from the Mass Department of Public Health for this week's testing. Probably get it tomorrow morning, so I can't give you a positivity rate, percentage rate tonight, but it will be available tomorrow. This past Thursday, we were at 5.25%, and when you compare about a month ago, we were still hovering around 10%. So that's definitely a very good trend. Currently, as of right now, I have 47 active cases within Raynham. They are all from the community. I have nothing within any of the congregate care, long-term care facility settings. And again, when you compare that to 6-7 weeks ago, when I was well over 200 positive cases within the Raynham community, that's again a positive trend. I hope and anticipate that we do continue that trend in the right direction. Other than that, it's still seeing a considerable household transmission, as has been the case all along since the fall, but still seeing some community-wide transmission. So if you have any questions, I can certainly answer them for you.
Thank you, Mr. Tanis. Mr. Badger, are you on, or Ms. Fahey? Go ahead,
Mr. Dolan. We continue to meet with our boards of health every Tuesday morning at 10. I want to thank Mr. Tanis for being here this evening to report out on the Raynham side. Mr. Badger did share with us similar information on the Bridgewater side, that we are trending in a positive direction, not meaning from positive cases, but a lack thereof. So hopefully, people did their due diligence over, the February break. That 10% that Mr. Tanis just spoke to, we were hovering on that 10 to 11% for a little bit, and that was post holiday break. And I think that's something, obviously, we all anticipated, but it took us a long time. And I think Mr. Tanis would agree, for us to kind of start to dig out of that. And that hit home here within the district. During that time, we had a number of positive cases, and our quarantines were averaging about 200 a week for our students, and anywhere from 50 to 75 a week for our staff. So hopefully we're starting to come out of that post-holiday spike. Hopefully, again, people did their due diligence last week on break, and we're not going to see an additional spike coming down the pike for us. And now that the vaccines are being rolled out currently in phase 2, I believe right now it's 65 and older. We're being told the next step would be educators. So we're hoping that all of these contributing factors will get us in a good place, so that, as parents had stated here this evening, we can put plans in place to get our students back, because that is our primary goal at this point. So thank you, Mr. Tanis, and thank you, Mr. Dolan, for continuously joining us on those Tuesday calls. I think they're incredibly important. They've really helped. That information provided to us has really helped drive our decision making in regards to a lot of different things throughout the district. So please know, Mr. Tanis, that we truly appreciate you and Mr. Badgett's efforts and continuing to meet with us every Tuesday.
Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Tanis? Thank you, Mr. Tanis. Appreciate you joining us again, and we will talk to you again on Tuesday.
Certainly, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tanis.
Up next, the report from the superintendent, Mr. Swenson.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan, members of the committee. As you know, when we were putting together my goals with the long range planning committee over the summer, we did talk about having a half-year review. One thing that I think has helped me along the way in terms of kind of collecting this information and evidence to support my goals is the conversation I had with Mr. Dolan about being able to report out monthly about some of the progress on my goals. So back in November, I started to report out. In November, I reported out on SMART Goal 1, December SMART Goal 2, and last month in January, SMART Goal 3. So what I'm going to just do is kind of put that information up. We've already, again, kind of went through those 3 goals. If Mrs. McDougall, so the first goal here, again, SMART Goal 1, throughout the school year, the superintendent will communicate to students, families, and staff, all stakeholders of the district re-entry plan as it pertains to Pillar 1, safe and supportive schools. And I provided that information in our November meeting. So if anyone has any questions about that.
No.
Okay, so we can proceed to goal number 2. And that's actually, if you can go back one, this is just some of the supporting evidence that we have. And this is all in the Google Drive for the school committee. And SMART Goal 2, again, this is what was reported out in December. Throughout the school year, superintendent will monitor, evaluate, and modify the action plans of the district plan. Pillar 2, establish a cohesive, rigorous district-wide system of teaching learning as it pertains to the 3 models of learning: full return, hybrid, which we are currently in, and remote. That could be implemented throughout the 2020-2021 school year. Again, this was reported out in December. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And maybe we could provide the evidence on the next slide. Again, this is all a collection of the evidence that I've been collecting to support progress on these goals. And again, it's in your Google Doc. Are we good?
Yep.
Okay, SMART Goal 3. Throughout the school year, I will monitor and evaluate the accomplishments of action plans, Pillar 1, safe and supportive schools, by developing safety protocols for the district to implement to protect students and staff from COVID-19. This is one that I reported out at the last school committee meeting. And the next slide will show the evidence that supports this. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Seeing none.
Okay, thank you. So the last goal, which I have not reported out on, which I'd just like to take a few minutes on here, is our SMART Goal number 4, to create the district's first diversity, equity, and inclusion group. And throughout the school year, I will monitor and evaluate the accomplishments of the action plans of Pillar 2, establish a cohesive, rigorous, district-wide system of teaching and learning as it pertains to developing curriculums that are free of bias and celebrates diverse populations. So with that being said, as you know, this school year, we have entered into a professional development contract with L&P Educational Services. We are currently focusing on our administrative team throughout this school year. Year 2 will most likely focus on our secondary level teachers and faculty and staff. And year 3 of the plan will then focus with our elementary folks, K4. We've also this year, as you know, created developed our diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. I'd like to thank all of those hardworking individuals who serve on that. And currently we are putting together an equity and establishing an equity framework for the district. There's a lot of other great work that's coming out of this committee. One of them is the surveys that were sent out earlier this week that were created by this committee for our parents and families and our students and our staff. One thing that they are also going to be conducting through L&P Educational Services are some focus groups over the course of the month of March for our unrepresented populations within the district. And the information gathered through those focus groups, along with the information gathered through these surveys, will definitely help us in our decision-making moving forward in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So if we could just go to the next slide. So again, we've established the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. We have our L&P services, which will be ongoing over the course of the next 3 years. They also have done things with our administrative staff and our teaching staff with different book clubs and whatnot throughout the school year and ongoing professional development. They've also been working with Mrs. Richards, who's been doing a wonderful job with a consultant from L&P, really looking at our social studies curriculum. There was some culturally insensitive material that was posted last spring during remote learning. Because of that, we have decided that it would behoove us to really look at that, curriculum, kind of look at where are there biases that exist within that, and then obviously, put an action plan together to correct those situations. We're focusing right now on social studies, with the goal being that we're going to do this type of assessment of our curriculum across all content areas. As I just stated, on Monday, we put out our family, student, and staff surveys. The focus group sessions will take place in this coming March. And as you might remember from my preliminary budget presentation, we are looking to add a position for the 2022 FY22 school year. And we're looking to implement at the district level a diversity, equity, and inclusion coordinator. So all of this, exciting and very important work is ongoing. Again, I can't thank enough the individuals that are serving on our committees. I can't thank enough Dr. Lazama and Mindy Polo from L&P, who have been working with our administrative team. And I really want to thank you as the committee for supporting us in all of this important and ongoing work. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have in regards to SMART Goal 4.
Any questions? None? Thank you for that review, Mr. Swenson, of your goals.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. And I will continue to update the committee on a monthly basis about my goals. And I believe in June, I'll have an end of the year report out to the full committee as well.
Very good. And now to the return to full in-person learning update. This, I know, Mr. Swenson, you and Mr. Powers have worked on together. I don't know who's taking the.
So I'll take the lead, and then I know Mr. Powers has been really working hard. The last couple of days, we had to shift gears a little bit with some information that's come to us over the course of the last few days from the Commissioner of Education, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, Jeff Riley, and the announcement yesterday through Governor Baker. I just want to let the parents within our communities and the parents that are in the audience this evening and the parents that spoke during public comment, please know that your voices are being heard. I say this all the time, and I say it about myself and Mr. Powers. I'm a father of 3 of students in the district. Mr. Powers has, 2 children within the district. We are living the same levels of frustration that you are as parents. We realize that we need to get our students back. And I just kind of want to put this out there that even though mentions of actual plans with actual details have not been presented to our communities, it does not mean that the planning has not been there. We have, since our return in January, been collectively as an administrative team trying to devise a way to bring students back to in-person learning. We realize currently, as hard as our teachers are working, it is a situation where programmatically it's not as educationally sound and never will be in comparison to a traditional brick and mortar setting. So please note that planning has been happening. We have put together ideas about bringing back targeted groups, age group wise.
Targeted.
Some of our more vulnerable populations, bringing those students back as well. What has happened over the course of the last few days is that Commissioner Riley has come out and basically stated that he has gone to the Massachusetts Board of Education and asked that they take a vote to bring back all elementary school students beginning in April. With that being said, we've already done some of this.
Yeah, he
planning.
just gotten home right before me.
Mr. Swenson,
Yes.
could I just ask you to pause for one moment? Folks in the audience, we need you to mute your lines. We can hear background conversation. It's very difficult for the committee to hear Mr. Swenson when we can hear those background conversations. So if you wouldn't mind, please muting yourselves. That would be greatly appreciated. Sorry, Mr. Swenson, carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. So with that being said, some of the groundwork has already been done. So this evening, we were going to present some information about not only this current school year, but what we are envisioning for fall of 2021 and the 2021-2022 school year. We had a call with the commissioner today. That vote by the Massachusetts Board of Education is going to happen over the course of the next few weeks. So once we get that information, we're going to start to really, right now, we already have to do the planning as if that vote's going to go through, which we already, have started anyway. And as soon as that information comes to us, that's when we will absolutely be reaching out to all of our stakeholders in regards to what this current school year looks like and what we are looking like moving forward in the fall of 2021. And with that, I will ask Mr. Powers if he could kind of take the mic and walk us through this PowerPoint that we have been kind of working on the last few days.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Swenson, Chairman Dolan, members of the school committee, members of the audience. I do want to provide, I'll try to keep it brief, but obviously comprehensive information for you tonight. Mr. Shantz, you can go to the next slide. So really what I'll try to provide an overview of this evening is our spring 2021 return planning process, talk about the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education return updates that Mr. Swenson spoke about that we received yesterday from the governor, the commissioner, and the Secretary of Education. And then we had a follow-up call with the commissioner today, provide some insight into next steps. and then give you a little insight into fall 2021 return to school plan. Go ahead, Mr. Shantz. Thank you. So again, to kind of go back, just to recap, we had received our initial fall reopening guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education in June of 2020. And since then, we have obviously developed and we continue to revise our reopening plan, which includes our 3 models of learning: a full in-person return, a hybrid learning model, which we're currently in, and then obviously a fully remote model. Now, with the hybrid model, obviously, as you know, certainly if you have a child in a remote program, hybrid also, does incorporate some remote learning. But really, that last model would be if the district had to go to a full remote model. So again, this is what started back in June of 2020 and continues. When we talk about revising this plan, we meet as an administrative team weekly throughout this school year, and obviously back in the summer. And reopening is a topic of conversation every week. And we're always looking at ways, how can we improve our reopening plan? How can we improve the processes that we put into place? Is it possible to bring back a grade level of students, a school of students? So these conversations are happening on a weekly basis. And obviously, executing some of those discussions, actually pouring through the information, looking at running numbers. We're constantly, we certainly have measured enough classrooms now, but we start to second guess ourselves, and we go back and we remeasure again just to make sure that, we're saying the right information. So in terms of revising this is definitely an ongoing process. But throughout this, there really have been 3 main areas that have emerged, and they, in fact, remain. And that's transportation, health and safety, enrollment and spacing. So I just wanted to provide a little insight on those 3 areas as well, just so you can kind of have a glimpse as to, what some of our challenges are as we go through this revision and planning process. Mr. Shantz? Thank you. So obviously this is somewhat of a moot point, but as you know, there were social distancing guidelines enacted on the school buses and vans for the fall of 2020, which allowed only 1 student per seat. Obviously, with those restrictions, we simply could not transport all students to school. Now, because we are a regional district and qualify for Chapter 71 reimbursement, which is regional school transportation, in order to qualify for that reimbursement, we must provide transportation to all eligible riders. That roughly equates plus or minus to about $1.8 million. So that's what we would roughly be giving up if we did not transport or seek reimbursement. And certainly $1.8 million is quite a sum of money. So it's not something that we wanted to move away from. But that being the case, obviously, we simply could not return all students, and we just simply didn't have the option. And you've seen this from some districts, and understandably so, why they're doing this. Some of the districts now that are starting to phase students back in, they are not providing transportation. Prior to the next bullet that I'll go over, their reopening reentry plans for the spring did not include transportation in some cases because they could not fit students on the buses. Now, what really has made this a moot point is that on February 11th, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education released updated transportation guidance, which essentially eliminated social distancing on the school buses. Students will still have to wear masks. They're still asked to not eat, drink, sing, speak loudly on the school bus, but obviously they're required to be masked. So that will remain in place as well. But what that means for us right now is that transportation is no longer an obstacle for us. We would be able to transport all of our students safely on the school bus. And those are conversations we've already had with Miss Ellen George, our transportation coordinator, and certainly our transportation vendor, Lucini Bus Lines. Mr. Shantz, please. Obviously, health and safety, and I appreciate that the parent that spoke earlier, Ms. Pettit, about health and safety being at the forefront. And this is something that Mr. Swenson and I have said from day one, that health and safety needs to be the priority. Thankfully, because of the mitigation strategies that we've put in place, when I say we, meaning the collective district, we have been able to safely remain open. Certainly, we had a hiccup given the number of students and staff that were at one time in quarantine, so we did have to go fully remote. But overall, we have been able to stay open for the most part in our hybrid model. And obviously those mitigation strategies are mask wearing, social distancing, hand washing or hand sanitizing, and the thorough cleaning our facilities department has done. And obviously I can't, stress the importance of our school nurses and the monumental tasks that they've taken on this year. They really are the backbone of our health and safety initiative here. But just some facts to share, because obviously we want to make sure everybody has an understanding of, again, the challenges that we face. As of February 19th, when the last report came out, both the towns of Bridgewater and Raynham, and you heard today from Mr. Tanis, the health agent from Raynham, have shown a decline in the number of cases and obviously the positivity rate. So we are trending in the right direction. However, at this current time, and we certainly hope this changes tomorrow, we are in a red category. Both towns remain in the red category. And if you rewind, say back to the fall reopening, at that time, the governor and even the commissioner, we were back in a green state. And so they were saying, if you were green, you should reopen. If you get into red, you should really consider, going fully remote. Well, we've obviously, as both communities have transitioned into red, but yet we've remained open and thankfully safely done so. The other important thing to point out, and, yes, we've, knock on wood, really have not had any outbreaks within the school, but that the 0 to 19 age group is still a vulnerable age group. And if you look at the state data that they put out in terms of their dashboard, the 0 to 19 age group for the last 2 weeks, again, new information will be coming out this week, but the 2 weeks prior had the highest number of positive cases. So it just, those are all things, again, just to, to share the facts. And as you know, Ms. Claire Grennan and Mr. Swenson and Ms. Richards share the number of students and staff that have positive cases and that are on quarantine on a weekly basis. And those numbers, although they are thankfully trending in the right direction, still remain fairly high. Mr. Swenson did point out, we certainly hope that, families, community members are heeding the advice of the governor and obviously following any type of restrictions for the community. But just to point out, we returned from school vacation on Monday, and we were informed of 13 positive student cases on Monday alone. We had another 7 cases reported on Tuesday, 6 students and 1 staff. So that's 20 positive cases in a 2-day period. So, yes, overall, our numbers are trending in the right direction, but you can see at any one time, these numbers can vary. So again, these are just the facts that we constantly deal with on a daily basis. And last, just to note that, obviously, anytime we do have a potential exposure in school, and obviously if you're dealing with this at work or in the community, you have to go through that close contact tracing and obviously identify those that potentially may be close contacts and they have to subsequently quarantine. We just want to know that as we do plan to return students to school, if we are to reduce social distancing, the potential does exist for the number of students and staff identified as close contacts. Should we have a positive exposure, certainly may increase. So again, not trying to provide information to sway either way, because as you heard Mr. Swenson say, we are planning to get kids back in school, but these are just some of the facts that we wanted to share and some of the roadblocks that we've certainly experienced throughout the school year. Mr. Chance? Obviously, the big thing right now that the district is facing is enrollment and spacing. In terms of our overall enrollment, it's not certainly much different from years past. But we still, because we're facing some challenges this year, enrollment, it plays an important role and factor in this. We are plus 62 students from the beginning of the school year, and that's not uncommon for our enrollment to go up during the school year. But certainly when you add 62 students, and again, across the district, doesn't necessarily have as great of an impact as one might think. Now that we have now that we have social distancing in place, it certainly can certainly have somewhat of a negative impact. And as you know, obviously, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but enrollment does vary by grade level in school, and so not all grade levels across the district look the same. In terms of the 2 towns, nor do 2 schools look the same when we talk about grade level spans. Mr. Shantz? And obviously, I just wanted to share some information here regarding spacing. And so you can see two columns. One is the how many students we could fit into a classroom using the minimum spacing established by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, which is 3 feet. And then how many students we can currently fit at our 4-foot minimum that the district has established. And in some cases, I've broken it out by grade level only because the configuration of the building may be slightly different. So, for example, at Merrill, for their kindergarten, those classrooms tend to be larger.
Looks like. Mr. Powers?
Yes.
Sorry, just take a pause. Folks, again, I need to interrupt Mr. Powers and ask that if you are on the call, that you mute your line, please. We're hearing some background conversation. It would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Powers. Sorry to interrupt.
No problem at all. So as I started to say, for Merrill Kindergarten, those classrooms are actually bigger than first grade. So that's why I separated it out here for you. So you can see using the 3-foot minimum versus 4-foot minimum, we can fit 27 students if we were to use a 3-foot minimum, and 24 students in a Merrill first grade classroom. That really doesn't necessarily impact us negatively. We would be able to fit all of our kindergarten and first grade students within those classrooms. One challenge we have at Merrill right now is furniture, but something that we're looking to overcome. La Liberty does present several challenges for us. Currently, using the 3-foot minimum established by the state, we're able to fit 24 students into a classroom. And over in the last column, I've tried to include some important notes. One of the challenges right now at the La Liberty is that we have 14 classes, 14 really of the 21 classes that exist there have more than 24 students assigned to it. And so, that would obviously require quite a monumental undertaking to try to figure out what we do about those classes that have higher class size. And I will talk about that in some upcoming slides, what the potential impact would be there. But you can see this does really impact most of our schools. Raynham Middle School, again, at 3 feet apart, can fit 24 students. They have 12 classes currently that have more than 24 students. Mitchell, we are at 20, again, using a 3-foot minimum, 24 students per class. 8 classes have more than 24 students. The one thing I will point out about the Mitchell is that for the most part, if a class is over, it may be over by 1, where at some of our other schools, when we talk about have more than, say, 24 or what the number is, in some cases, it's significantly higher. It could be 4, 5, 6 additional students per class over the minimum number of students or the maximum number of students that we could fit in there. So again, looking at if it's 25 students, we're pretty confident that 24 number is a solid number. But if we had to go back and potentially remeasure some of the egress space that we have, we certainly need to leave egress spaces in the classroom. But could we take an inch of that egress on either end and potentially try to create some additional space? When we're talking about 4, 5, 6 students, that's simply just not possible. Currently at the Williams, we can fit 25 students using that 3-foot minimum, and that actually would fit all of the students at the Williams. One thing I need to note, and obviously you can see it down the bottom of this chart, but it's important to note here when we're talking especially about the Williams. For Mr. Clark and the Williams School, this assumes that that none of our students that are fully remote will return to school if we bring students back. What then happens is, if Mr. Clark is say at 23, 24 students per grade level, he can currently fit his classes and all of his students in there. If our students return from remote learning, which they certainly can at any time, and certainly I would think we'd be faced potentially with that if we announce that we are fully reopening. We would expect some of our fully remote students to return. That could certainly impact these numbers either way. So we may be faced with a different situation at Williams in a matter of weeks and days. Bridgewater Middle School, certainly, as you've heard the unique situation that Bridgewater Middle School is in. Bridgewater Middle School is a school I know that many hold near and dear to their heart, not just for what they've had to endure, but the phenomenal staff and students over there. And currently right now, they don't have a home. So our Bridgewater Middle School 7th graders are housed down at the Williams School, where they can fit 25 students per class using that 3-foot minimum. We actually have 7 of the 10 7th grade classes that have more than 25 students. And then Bridgewater Middle School 8th grade, which is currently housed at the high school, they're able to fit 18 students using that 3-foot minimum in a classroom, and all 10 classes at the 8th grade level have more than 18 students. Now, why does that present a challenge? In a few slides, as I stated, I'll talk about some of the things that we can do to try to remedy this. Unfortunately, because they're a school without a home, they don't have a gym, a cafeteria, an auditorium to house students in. The Williams and high school, they may be utilizing those spaces. So certainly Bridgewater Middle School presents somewhat of a challenge, and we need to be mindful of that. At the high school, at 3 feet, Ms. Watson and her staff in your average classroom can fit 18 students using that 3-foot minimum. Now, high school is a little bit different because the students aren't assigned to a team, or they're not assigned to a homeroom teacher where they stay with all day. So each period somewhat fluctuates. If you look at Ms. Watson's current schedule and take first period alone, there are 36 classes during first period that operate with a higher enrollment than 18 students. So that would be 36 potential communal spaces that Ms. Watson would need to try to find for these students. So certainly it's just a reality that we need to be mindful of. Mr. Shantz? So again, just to reiterate some of the points that I've already shared with you, we are currently housing 7 schools and 6 buildings. That is just a challenge. That is something that we are faced with on a daily basis, have been for a number of years now, and we certainly will be for another year. As you know, fall of 2022 is when the new Mitchell School is slated to be open, and that will certainly alleviate some of our spacing constraints. But again, one of the reasons why we didn't return in the fall, and certainly one of the reasons why we've struggled to return thus far, is that we simply just do not have the space in traditional classrooms for our students. And so, as you know, DESE established that 3-foot minimum. The district has been using a 4-foot minimum. If we were to return students, and you heard Mr. Swenson say, right now the intent of the commissioner is to return elementary students, with potentially a return of middle school and high school at a later date if possible. We would more than likely need to use that 3-foot minimum that DESE has established in order to bring students back. But even at that 3-foot minimum, as you saw in that previous slide, we would be moving classes into communal spaces. And so that means we're taking students, teachers, out of their traditional classroom that they've been in, for a number of months now, and relocating them to the gym, to the cafeteria, to an auditorium, to a library. And again, that's not to say that we wouldn't do that, but that just is the reality that we wanted to make sure that we're being transparent and sharing with you. The other situation that does exist, when you talk about trying to find, in the high school's example, 36 new spaces, 36 communal spaces, you're probably looking at that point, or even at, say, La Liberty, you're looking at that point potentially having to reshuffle some classes, which means you may be taking students out of one classroom and assigning them to a new teacher in April or May. So again, that's not to say that it won't happen, but we just want people to understand that is the reality, that as we plan to bring students back, that reality does exist. Mr. Shantz? So good news, 100% good news. We did receive, obviously, as you saw yesterday on the news, I'm sure if you watched the press conference, we did receive that great news that the governor, the commissioner, and the secretary of education would like to see a full return to in-person learning for as many students as possible. The focus initially will be on elementary school students, but as Mr. Swenson already shared with you, during the early part of March, the commissioner will seek the authority from the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education to determine when hybrid and remote learning models no longer count towards learning hours. As you know, right now, If we're in a hybrid model, we have to provide an average of 35 hours per week. In a fully remote model, those districts have to provide 40 hours per week of live instruction, I should say. But at some point, the commissioner is going to say neither one of those models, regardless of how many hours you're providing, will count towards a structured learning time. Only in-person learning will. So that is something that he is going to seek in early March. And if the board approves that, obviously that's when really the wheels will get into motion from a state level. They will be sharing additional guidance, what their detailed plan is, what it should look like at districts. We're obviously going to take that ball and start to run with it right now, based on what we know about his early intents and what his goal is. But obviously, as I alluded to, he really is looking at doing a phased approach to returning. So again, he understands that, to bring back an entire school system, certainly one of, almost 5,400 students, 600 staff, you're talking about 6,000 individuals, may not happen overnight, nor would we be able to do it all on a Monday. And so, he realizes that. And so that's why his initial focus is on elementary school students and getting them back to in-person learning for 5 days per week at some point in April. Again, we don't have a definitive start date on when he expects that to happen, but we know we're looking for a target return date of sometime in April. So again, good news. That is great news for our students, great news for our families, great news for our staffs. I think everybody collectively is not loving, teaching and learning in a pandemic, and we understand that. But we also, as we shared in the previous slides, there are some realities that we are faced with on a daily basis that unfortunately drive what we do in terms of educational programming. Mr. Shantz? So as we've already talked about in things that we've already been doing and that we will continue to do so, obviously, we're going to work proactively and collaboratively with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. We will take the guidance that they continue to provide us and implement that guidance. We are so thankful to be able to have Mr. Tanis and Mr. Badger to work with, and obviously Ms. Fahey and certainly our nurse leader, Ms. Grennan. But we will take guidance from our health agents. When we talk to them on a weekly basis, we're asking questions like, are you comfortable with bringing X number of students back? Are you comfortable holding these type of activities? And really up until recently, the numbers hadn't declined enough for them to comfortably say, yes, we can start bringing kids back, or yes, we can start holding these type of events. I think everyone was really, wanted to proceed cautiously because we don't want to see another spike. And so we want to incrementally roll this phase out. Obviously, a huge task for our facilities department to get our classrooms rebuilt and obviously provide the necessary equipment to be able to do that. And certainly, the administrative team, not just our central office administrative team, but our building-based administrative team, and certainly all those involved. They know the task at hand. They've been living it again since June. So it's rolling up their sleeves and working hard is nothing new to them. And certainly, working with our collective bargaining units, we have various collective bargaining units throughout the district. And again, just to talk, and I so appreciate all of those that spoke tonight and highlighted the collective efforts of our staff and how hard they're working. And, they really are doing the best they can. And I will say, first and foremost, as the assistant superintendent, certainly have high expectations, but I also have high expectations as a father of 2 in the district. And on a daily basis, I just continue to be so impressed. That's not to say that, as a district, as an individual, I or Mr. Swenson, or as a collective district, we can't do better. And we're always trying to get better on a daily basis. But again, I just do appreciate and want to echo those comments about our teachers and staff, just how hard they're working from our classroom teachers, to our cafeteria workers, to our facilities department. This really has been a collective effort, and one that we wouldn't have been able to tackle and continue to tackle without everybody working together. And certainly Lucini as well, our transportation vendor. Go ahead, Mr. Shantz, thank you. So really, what are our next steps? Obviously, we want to gather as much feedback as possible from our stakeholders, so from our staff, from our families. Obviously, as you know, we convened a reopening committee last summer. We will reconvene that group to vet different ideas and strategies by. We'll obviously be gathering information from our stakeholders through surveys. And again, we're gonna, it's a little bit different right now because we're getting our guidance from DESE. And so, when Commissioner Riley does seek that authority, what he puts in place will be, his mandates will carry the same weight as potentially, laws and regulations. So, in terms of gathering information from our staff and families, we're going to do that as much as possible. But and that'll help drive some of our decisions. But also, a lot of our decisions will come right from the guidance that DESE has put out as well. But just to review, because we never want anyone to be caught off guard to say, why is my child being, moved to the cafeteria, the library? How come he or she has been assigned to a new teacher? Those are realities for us, and we're not saying that they're not going to happen, because again, we are pushing forward to try to get as many students back to in-person learning this spring, and obviously we'll talk about the fall. But these are realities, just again, given some of the situations that we're dealing with on a daily basis. Go ahead, Mr. Shantz. So again, I know this seems somewhat premature, but certainly people want to know, what our intent is for the fall. Our intent has been the same all along, to get back to a somewhat of a normal situation, to get students back into school. We really weren't sure when that was going to happen. We weren't sure we'd be able to bring all of our students back this spring. We had started the planning process to be able to bring selected groups back. Now, obviously, with the commissioner's guidance, it looks like we're starting with our elementary school students and then working our way up if possible. But even for the fall, we will wait to see, some of what DESE puts out in terms of guidance and go from there. Obviously, our health and safety metrics, what the current situation is, obviously, we need to factor that in as well. Do one of these, the new variant, or does one of these new variants, potentially cause a spike in cases and potentially set us back? Those are things that are realities. We're forging ahead and assuming that that's not going to be the case, but we certainly never know. But one constant will remain is that enrollment and spacing, and we've talked about how we can kind of get around that using some of these communal spaces. So again, that will be a same challenge that we face in the fall. We may have in some situations classes starting off the school year assigned to a gym, a caf, a library, and again, those are just the reality given the fact that we're down 1,000 student school. But that's not to say that we're not going to open the doors in September. Our intent right now is to open the doors at all our schools for all our students, pre-K to 12, full in person, 5 days per week. That is our intent. That's what we're going to plan for. But certainly we will, base those decisions upon DESE guidance, health and safety, and what challenges we're faced by enrollment and spacing. And I'm just going to turn this back over to Mr. Swenson for some final thoughts. There is one last slide. I'll just jump to it super fast. Certainly, if anybody has any questions at any time, I know many of you reach out to Mr. Swenson and me already, and we so appreciate that because we'd rather give you the information, the accurate information right from the district as opposed to getting it from other sources. So if you do have questions, comments, concerns, obviously my contact information is already on the website, but it's certainly here as well. And we do appreciate you reaching out. Again, we enjoy those conversations. So Mr. Swenson, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Before turning over to
Mr. Swenson, you're on mute, I think.
Oh.
That's how my wife likes it. Right. So I'm going to just thank you, Mr. Powers, for all of your hard work. Since last March, this thing has been an absolute bear for all of us. We realize the burden it is placed on parents and our students, obviously, first and foremost. As Mr. Powers just stated, our goal is to get all of our students back. We want to start that with the phased-in approach, with the information and guidance that comes to us through Commissioner Riley, hopefully sooner rather than later, within the next few weeks when that vote hopefully is approved through the Board of Education. We say that not only as the superintendent and assistant superintendent, but again, as dads in the district of 5 wonderful kids that we realize are losing out on a ton. Mr. Powers and I were talking about his son, Matt, today. He's missed out on his high school experience as a sophomore, his spring, his spring sports, his fall sports, going into the winter sport. He's missed out on all of these rites of passage when it comes to, our students at all grade levels. We just caution you, and I know that I've said this in many emails. I know that I've had a lot of great conversations with parents over the course of the last month or so via email or call, phone call. And please, we encourage you to reach out to us. And again, as Mr. Power said, get the information directly from us rather than through other sources. But I do caution folks, because it's easy to do. We cannot compare ourselves to other districts. We just can't. It's not apples and apples. It's apples and oranges. Every district has its own logistical issues in which they need to contend with. One of our biggest, and we've said this from the beginning, and I realize people say, well, we realize you're down 1,000-person school. You still need to figure it out. I absolutely agree. And it's well within my pay grade and Mr. Power's pay grade to figure it out. And that's what we've been doing since January. Okay. But sometimes that's easier said than actually done, because there are some other competing factors that we've had to really, combat since the return in January. Just talked about our COVID numbers throughout both communities. We started pre-Thanksgiving break at a 2.5%, transmission rate and conversion rate in our towns. After the holidays, it was in the 10 to 11th percentile. So those things, when we're being told by our health agents who we depend upon, I would not encourage a return at this time. We're going to listen, because as Mr. Power stated earlier, it's about still and always will be the health and safety of our students and our staff. With that being said, I know that folks want to say things like East Bridgewater is coming back, West Bridgewater is coming back. I am in constant communication with those superintendents. Again, logistical issues. At East Bridgewater High School, they can get 28 students in their classrooms at 3 feet. We can get 18. That's why they can bring more students back. Mr. Powers just talked about transportation. Luckily, we received the guidance, but the guidance we received was the Thursday before before February vacation. As a regional school district, we are required to transport all of our students that are eligible. If we were going to start planning our return, that means that we would have had to, if these regulations were not lessened, doubled or even tripled our busing. That's not something that's in the operational budget. Okay, and those are all things that we need to think about. I know Hanover brought people back and said, you know what? We're not transporting you. We don't have that luxury. Again, logistical issues that each district has to take into account. I know folks have asked us, in terms of being down a site, have you explored communal spaces within our communities or portable trailers to bring in? Yes, in fact, we did that back in 2015 when the roof collapse originally happened. And I will tell you this, they're incredibly costly. The portables that we were going to bring in, we were going to move central office out into the back of where we currently are and bring students into where our central office area is. It was going to be upwards of about $1 million for a 5-year lease. Not to mention, not each of our sites has the external space for these portables. Yes, we reached out to BSU. Yes, we've reached out to other, St. Thomas and St. Anne's Church. Again, it just does not have the space that we would need in order to really run a traditional and educationally sound program. Not to mention, with COVID and the pandemic, these institutions do not want to bring in outside individuals into, say, the BSU campus. And you know what? I understand and I respect that, because we're not bringing in outside groups into our facilities either. Because again, it's about a focus on the safety and well-being of our kids. So Please note, though, this is not a laundry list of excuses. It's the reality of the situation. It's our reality. And we realize that despite all of these factors, we got to figure out a way to circumvent them and get our kids back. And please note that even though plans may not have been thrown out there with specifics, they have been in place. They have been vetted a number of ways. And we did have plans to bring back certain populations of students, age level wise, and some of our most vulnerable students, like our ESL students, our special education, 504 students. All of those are within our plan. Now we're kind of in a waiting game a little bit because the commissioner comes out with Governor Baker yesterday and talks about a phased reentry. So right now we're going to continue to plan and do everything we need to do in terms of our due diligence based upon our assumption that that vote is going to get passed and that we're going to bring our kids back in starting in April. And yes, our primary major goal is that when those doors open in September in this district, all 5,500 students are coming back to us full-time, 5 days a week. Please just stay with us, be patient. Please know that we're not just sitting around trying to run out the clock. That's just not in our nature. It's not in our makeup. We're grunts, we're workers. We're doing what we need to do. I would just ask that folks be patient. And I realize it's difficult to ask you to be patient when we're going on almost a full year in a few weeks of this. No one wants this for our kids. No one wants this for our parents. No one wants this for our faculty and staff and our communities at large. So with that being said, I just ask that you stay with us, be patient, and I promise you, once we have the information that we need to get from the state, and once we have all of our ducks in a row, that information will be shared with you as stakeholders within this community. Thank you.
Swenson, in the news conference, the commissioner was asked a question about districts like us that would still face constraints at the 3-foot social distancing. And he responded with, we would work with those districts. Did he elaborate on that at all?
No, all he really did elaborate on today, and I don't know if this was some miscommunication, Mr. Gelfi. He did state today, there may be a waiver process for some districts that may have difficulty coming back, but that was really focused on the districts that are currently fully remote still, because there are quite a few districts that no students have stepped foot in a building as of yet. What he stated was that waiver may allow those remote districts to come back in a hybrid model initially before they come back with a full in-person learning model. He did kind of talk a little bit today, but again, kept it very close to the vest, which I understand because he's got the same way we have to keep our information close to the vest because we don't want it getting out and then it kind of takes on a life of its own and, misinformation gets out, from that. And I think he's being a little guarded right now in regards to that, which I understand and respect. But he mentioned helping districts like us. I mean, at the end of the day, we've vetted this out, and yes, we can come back. It's just as Mr. Powers stated, it may mean, unfortunately, students being changed to a different teacher's classroom, or now a teacher who had 24 kids in a traditional classroom space now has 40 kids in the cafeteria. So we just want to be crystal clear with our parents so that they understand that would be a huge disruption in April. But if it's going to get our kids back, we're going to do it, obviously. If we were to put all of these things in place, late spring into the summer, and kids and parents realize that they are going to be in a class of 40 in a cafeteria for 180 days next school year, but they know that from day one, then we feel a little bit more comfortable with that. We are concerned about some of the disruptions this transition may cause. But we also realize we gotta get our kids back in school. So, we're gonna do everything we can. So, Mr. Gelby, if we find out more information from the commissioner about how he and his team can assist districts right now that do have space issues like we currently have, we will absolutely share that information with the committee, even if that means we have to, possibly, through Mr. Dolan, call a special school committee meeting to get that information to you prior to us, moving forward with our plans for some type of reentry in April.
Mr. Swenson, you did mention it. He did say the part about having a number of districts that are still fully remote and offering them assistance. Just to highlight that, there are still 20% of the districts in the Commonwealth that are fully remote.
Yep.
As of today.
Yeah, I think either Governor Baker or Commissioner Riley said that at the press conference yesterday as well.
Mr. Swenson, when do you expect to survey parents to see how they feel about coming back full in person, or if they're remote, if they want to change full in person, or if they don't feel comfortable, and want to not be back full in person?
Yeah, and again, Mrs. King, that's a great question. We're gonna have to do that sooner rather than later. So we'll sit with Mrs. Richards, who's our survey guru. We'll put something, together, and it's not going to be an extremely detailed survey this time around. It's going to some pretty, quick, easy answers. Do you want to come back to full, return in April? If not, do you want to, go remote? Because we need to know those logistical pieces to this puzzle. So I would say within, the next few weeks or so, because again, even though we may have to wait a few weeks for that vote to come down from the Massachusetts Board of Education, we're still planning as if that vote is a yay, and we're coming back, that sometime in April. But we will need that information from our parents, because we're going to have to adjust accordingly. We also have a concern too. We have quite a few students right now who are fully remote that obviously would be allowed to come back if they so chose. And that creates an issue for us in terms of those class sizes that Mr. Powers reported out on. Because as you saw on one of those slides, in the beginning of our planning, when that information came out, I think it was like June 25th, we started doing our space assessments, and we started doing it with our building principals and looking at, incoming cohorts of kids into different grade levels. We made sure that if we were ever in this scenario, that we would be able to bring all of our kids back at any time. Since that time, though, we've had 62 move-ins. So when they move in, we need to find them a space within classrooms. So now if some of our remote kids decide to come back, on top of those 62 students that have taken their space in a classroom, or, a classmate's space in the classroom, those are, concerning pieces, to the puzzle that, we need to take into consideration. But I'm confident that, we have a plan in place that would allow us to do so. Again, parents just have to understand it would be disruptive. It would be disruptive in that it might mean that their child might need to switch a teacher, a team, and they might have to come out of a traditional classroom into a larger communal space like a gymnasium, a library, a lecture hall, a cafeteria. So we just want, all of our cards on the table so parents have an understanding of what coming back in April may mean to their child and their family.
Mr. Powers, I have a follow-up question for you specifically, sir. You had mentioned potentially moving students from one teacher to another in April or May, and that being disruptive. Obviously, that's disruptive socially, but what does that do educationally to a student?
Well, I think one of the potential challenges there, Mr. Dolan, is that, we within days, weeks of each other, most classrooms are on the same pace. So hopefully that if a student does go to a new teacher, they're transitioning somewhat seamlessly to similar concepts. However, in some cases, we actually have to reorder the units we teach based on materials that we have available. So it could be a situation where a child is entering into a particular class where a teacher is covering a unit that may have already been covered by the teacher that they came from. So there could be some redundancy. There could be some missed learning, depending again on the transition and where everybody's at. So that is one challenge that we potentially face. Now again, all things being equal, we would hope that they would be within days or a week, give or take. But because of those other situations, possibly having to share materials, rearrange units, they could be either sitting through the same unit again or completely missing a whole unit of learning.
Thank you, Mr. Power. Mr. Murray, did you have a question?
I do. Really quick, this can either go to Mr. Swenson or Mr. Powers. Do we have any updates on potentially distributing the vaccine to staff on site at the school district? And if so, would that allow us to decrease from the 3-foot limit down to a 2 to maybe down to a 0 if staff has received the vaccine?
So at this point, in terms of the vaccine, we had put some information out to our staff. Our intent all along has been if we were able to secure the vaccines to run a district clinic for our staff. Unfortunately, as you know, it seems as though the state government has started to kind of pull some of those vaccines away from the local health agents and so forth, and obviously go to these larger vaccination sites. So I know just in our weekly calls with the health agents, they are struggling to secure vaccinations. Obviously, thankfully, we were able to get through our local first responders, but I know as they have gone through the other phases, 75 and older, 65 and older, they really are struggling to secure enough vaccinations. That being the case, I am not as confident as I once was that we will be able to run our own clinic. And speaking to our nurse leader, Claire Grennan, she and obviously Mr. Swenson and I are all on the same page, and we communicated this the other day to our health agents. If possible, we would still want to run our own clinic, at any time. But it doesn't seem to be as possible as it once was. That being the case, we haven't received any indication from the commissioner that if staff are vaccinated, that they would at this point go down from 3 feet to 2 feet to 1 feet to no social distancing. He didn't give any indication that that would be the case. So I don't, too early for me to speculate on if that's possible. What he said going forward was that, where department has put out that 3-foot minimum, and that's what we should plan for.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am a firm believer, even when this all started, I thought the 6-foot rule was extreme. And when this whole process, when we took a vote as a school committee back over the summertime of going down to a hybrid model, I actually walked initially into one of those meetings saying I wanted to go back to full remote. But after seeing the restraints and the guidance that the state has made us follow, I'm not optimistic anymore that we can make that happen unless some of those restraints are lifted. Even going down to the 3-foot rule, by seeing the numbers that you provided us tonight, there's not going to be any equity between the grades or the schools. So what's to stop one grade 3 student on the Bridgewater side from not going to school, but yet a 3rd grade student on the Raynham side can go to school? So I see there's a lot of logistical playing it fair across the board for each side of the district, from each grade. And I think until some of these restrictions are taken off of us and lifted down to beyond less than 3 feet, I hate to say it, but I don't see something happening unless those restrictions are removed from us. I feel like our hands are tied right now, and unless the state comes up with some changes on their side that we can kind of trickle down to us, it's going to be a tough sell. But thank you for all that you do.
Any other questions before we move on? Yes.
So while we wait for further state guidance, you've alluded to that we're already working on plans to implement getting more students back, especially in terms of high needs. Could we still continue to move forward with those rather than putting the brakes on? We have space for students of higher needs or the younger students that need the most support. And it looks like we have a little more room with the very youngest and bringing them back, even phased in on our own with the where we do have space, then still education feasible. I would like to see us, start moving in that direction if that's still possible, rather than holding up another month, waiting for more guidance.
Yeah, I would say, Mr. Florence, there's a lot of moving parts to bringing these kids back. We would need a good month of planning. It's not something that's going to happen over a weekend. I mean, you just heard Mr. Powers say, with Merrill, furniture. We got to track down furniture. We got to set up classrooms. We got to totally redo what the building schedules are currently, because they've had to be, drafted in a way that supported hybrid. We have to take care of buses. There's a lot of, by the time we get all of our ducks in a row, it probably would be April. So, I mean, we're looking at March being next week, right? So there's a lot of moving parts to this. Really, truly, too, we want to make sure now we're following the commissioner's guidance in terms of what he feels as though the phased re-entry is. And we want to make sure we can get as many kids back as possible based upon that guidance. Now, that might mean they give us a certain percentage of guidance and that we feel like we can go above and beyond. We absolutely will. But, I think it's important to realize as much planning as we've done to actually put these plans actually into motion, prior to April, the 1st of April or that first week of April would be incredibly difficult.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Mrs. Holbrook.
Mr. Powers, this is just a clarification. When you say that communal spaces will be used for a class, is it possible that more than one class will be sharing that communal space?
Thank you, Ms. Holbrook, for that question. Yes, the possibility does exist. Again, obviously, it may vary by school depending on how many classes we have that are over that 3-foot minimum. But yes, you could, it may not be a case of where it's one class in the cafeteria. It might be, 3 or 4 classes in the cafeteria. Obviously, that presents a whole nother set of challenges where, depending on the cafeteria, you may have dividers that are set up so you can almost kind of create a natural barrier, or you may have kind of going to that open classroom concept where you just have, multiple teachers trying to teach. I think we would have to get creative in that situation and possibly look at, co-teaching and tri-teaching and quad teaching, whatever it may be, to make that situation work. But yes, the possibility does exist. I just think of, and this is, I know hard for me to wrap my head around, and I've run the numbers with Ms. Watson so many times, but when you look at 36 classes given during one period that we have to find new spaces for, those classes will definitely be sharing the same space. We just don't have 36 individual spaces, and the same thing is true at obviously, our other schools. One thing I apologize for not including this, but it just came to me as I was talking about available spaces. There are some spaces that could be utilized. However, we just don't necessarily have bodies to staff it. In some cases, if you think of a computer lab, in many ways, we have not used our computer labs in a lot of our buildings this year. So we could dismantle a computer lab, take that furniture out, set up another classroom. Again, that now involves taking students out of their current homeroom. So that's, the first thing that would have to happen. The second thing that would have to happen is being able to secure another adult to actually lead that class. And as you know, the school committee may or may not know, but I think you do because you supported it earlier in the year. Mr. Swenson advocated to hire a cadre of adults to come in instead of, because we were struggling to find a substitute pool, daily subs. And so Mr. Swenson advocated for hiring year-long full-time subs. And unfortunately, we struggled, you know, to fill all those positions. People just unfortunately, I understand why we're very hesitant to take on those positions early on, just given the uncertainty of the virus. And so, and we've continued to struggle, you know, throughout the school year. You know, again, normal things have happened, right? We still have staff members, you know, taking leave of absence. It could be a maternity leave, it could be a medical leave, could be, you know, a leave for whatever reason, and we have to cover those classes. We have struggled in many cases to find suitable candidates to take on those positions. So it's not, I would love to say it would be as easy as just dismantling that computer lab and setting up, you know, 25 or 24, given the, you know, the classroom, 24 desks and say we're good. But we just unfortunately don't have the adult bodies to take on those additional classes at this time. Because, and if we do, you know, use some of our existing staff, we're currently taking them away from their assignment. And so we're, you know, we're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul, and maybe we find ourselves in that situation. But again, you know, something unfortunately in those situations, you know, it takes a setback. I know I went beyond your question, Ms. Holbrook, so I apologize, but I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Any other final questions? Yes, Ms. King.
Just to clarify, when the Commissioner Riley talked about bringing elementary back, he's talking about K through 5. We don't always think about the 5th graders, since especially in Raynham, they're at the middle school. But to clarify, he was talking about K through 5. Is that correct, Mr. Powers?
So we don't necessarily have, you know, true confirmation of that, Ms. King. We believe that is his intent. We assume that when, you know, his further guidance comes out, it will include K-5 to start. But our initial information that we have is that it more than likely would be K-5. However, each district kind of sets up their elementary levels differently. Some districts, you know, are K-6 at the elementary level. And so, you know, the expectation would be that you're bringing back elementary. You know, so what does that mean for us? If it is a K-5 situation, we realize that, you know, back to Mr. Moreira's point about equitable opportunities and access, you know, that does create some challenges. You know, for example, if we're just say K-4, because now Raynham Middle School starts at 5th grade, you know, we're talking about Merrill, Liberty, and only Mitchell, and then 1 grade at Williams. If we try to, you know, go K-6, because that would at least take care of all of Merrill, all of La Liberty, all of Mitchell, and all of Williams, that would only be 2 grades at Raynham Middle School, and maybe that's what we go with. And that would then leave 7 and 8 on both sides of the district, not initially back full time. So that, you know, to a certain degree, creates more equitable opportunities for our students. So I just think we, you know, we'll have a little flexibility. I don't think we'll have the flexibility to say, if he says K-5, we're only going to do K-3. I think we're going to have to meet the minimum of what he puts out. And then, as Mr. Swenson said, if we can bring back, you know, additional grades at that time, we will, or hopefully, you know, shortly thereafterwards.
And to Mr. Powers, that he stated there might be future guidance coming out after the initial phase in of the elementary, where at that point, you know, it may be a few weeks later, he talks about bringing back, you know, the middle school. And we just hope that all of this information is provided to us so that we can proactively plan accordingly. So
I think the famous line, Mr. Swenson, is more guidance to follow. Isn't that what we usually get? So we're waiting with bated breath, as we always are.
Very good. Thank you both. So seeing no other questions, we'll move along. Regional agreement update, I'll take that. So we have met, the regional agreement group has met 3 times, December 9th, January 20th, and February 4th. Mr. Dutton from Bridgewater, Mr. Waters from Raynham, Selectwoman Riley, Councilman George, Mr. Swenson, Ms. Macedo, our business manager, Ms. King, and myself make up that group. We are moving the regional agreement forward. We have gotten feedback from members from both communities and this body. We will meet one more time in the next coming weeks in the hopes, our hope, I should say, was to have this go before the voters of Raynham in May for their spring town meeting. I'm not sure we're going to be able to make that deadline based on attorney review, and then the agreement needs to go to the Department of Elementary and Special Education. But we are going to certainly try our best to make that happen. But that, I wanted to give the committee an update of that. So that is that. Any questions? Yes.
Yeah, I had spoken with you about that on page 6. I'm just concerned about that emergency capital expenses on leased premises. I guess I'd like to know what defines an emergency. And then anything $10,000 or more would go to the towns, and anything less would go to the district. And I would be concerned that, you know, if one town has, you know, 10 or 11 small little items, that could really eat into our district budget. And then further, it says for the town of Raynham, the bills would be submitted in article in accordance with the town meeting schedule. It doesn't say what you do for the town of Bridgewater. So, and then below that, it talks about capital costs and how it's expensed. And I would just think it's cleaner to keep all capital costs, no matter what it is, to each town. We go and define that each town is responsible for their own buildings. I just would be concerned about, well, what's an emergency? So I would just like to point that out to somebody to further look at that.
Yep, and we will definitely be taking a look at that at our next meeting.
Thank you.
Our next meeting has not been scheduled yet, but we will take a look at that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, budgets, any other questions on that? Sorry. Budget subcommittee, Dr. Freeman-Dowski.
Thank you. The budget subcommittee met on February 8th and February 22nd. These meetings were to begin discussion of FY22 budget and Mr. Swenson's preliminary budget. And we just have 2 voting items from that. And as a motion, the budget subcommittee unanimously voted to recommend to the full committee to the posting and hiring process of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Coordinator for this current year. We felt the importance of this position for the district warranted the hiring for this year. We want to move forward with our efforts with our consultants in professional development, addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion in our curriculum, as well as culture here at the Bridgewater Raynham Regional School District. So that would be, again, to hire that position for this current year, hoping to get the best person for that position, and that is in the form of a motion.
Very good. That's a motion by Dr. Freeman-Dowski. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Flynn. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Florence.
Aye.
Mr. Gelfi.
Aye.
Mr. Hammond. Aye. Mrs. Holbert.
Aye.
Mrs. King.
Aye.
Mr. Marrera.
Aye.
Dr. Freeman-Dowski.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
And also as a motion to approve the 2021-2022 fee schedule as presented in your package. There are no changes from this current year with the exception of the parking fee. We restored that to $100 as we have great faith that next year we will be back to normal.
Very good. That's a motion by Dr. Freeman-Dowski. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. King. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Florence.
Aye.
Mr. Gelfi.
Aye.
Mr. Hammond. Aye. Mrs. Holbert.
Aye.
Mrs. King.
Aye.
Mr. Marrera.
Aye.
Dr. Freeman-Dowski.
Aye.
The chair votes aye.
And I just asked that someone could put that on the website when possible. And finally, we meet again on March 8th, and our school committee budget presentation will be on March 10th at 7 o'clock.
Very good.
Thank you.
We will have that fee schedule posted. And that reminds me, Dr. Freeman-Dowski, thank you. We will also have the spring and fall return to learning updates slide presentation that Mr. Powers presented on the website as well for folks to go back to and reference. Moving on, we have policy subcommittee report. Mrs. Holbrook.
Thank you, Chairman Dolan. It's getting late. The policy subcommittee met on Tuesday, February 9th, virtually. And the policy subcommittee reviewed and discussed policy BDA, which is school committee organizational meeting. And this policy was brought forward and changed to add additional information regarding the office of the chair and the vice chair. So if you look at the document, we added what is in red. So we've added to that policy, as of the date of the reorganization of the school committee in 2021, the office of chair and vice chair must alternate representation between the member communities, with no community holding both offices at the same time. During each election year, the two offices must alternate between the member communities. And in the next paragraph, it starts off with, in the event the chair and vice chair are no longer members of the school committee, the senior member, and in parentheses, we added the word consecutive years served, will act as the chair pro tem, and we added during the reorganizational meeting. And those were the changes for policy BDA. So since the changes did not change the integrity of the policy, it will not, they did change, the integrity of the policy, so it will require 2 readings for that.
So we will make sure the policy BDA is on our next meeting's agenda.
Thank you. The next policy to be updated.
Can I?
Sure.
Can I just say, what we're adding in here is what we do anyway. We have a Bridgewater chair, Raynham vice chair. We have been doing this every year anyway. So we just wanted to put that into our policy going forward, even though it's been an understood thing that we have been doing.
My question would be, it sounds like the word alternate is in there. Are you saying this year we have a Bridgewater person as chairman, next year it'll be a Raynham person and a Bridgewater as co-chair?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that would have to happen every single year.
So then we don't have Bridgewater
Yep,
chair
okay,
every
just making sure.
year, which we have been doing that, but it wasn't in the policy. And also we put in there something, if, say, the chair and vice chair do not win the election, who runs that reorganizational meeting before we have a chair, you know? So, just put it.
Well, and just to explain, it prohibits someone from being chair more than 1 year back to back.
Correct.
Okay, the next policy to be updated is housekeeping in nature, and the changes better reflect what we are currently doing. The policy is policy BDE, and it's subcommittees of the school committee. And for that policy, we have all subcommittees will be composed of 2 members from each member community and will not exceed a quorum of the full committee. In addition, for number 2, we took out subject to approval by the committee. So it will just read, the committee chairperson will appoint the subcommittee chairperson and its members. We added number 6, which is the standing school committee subcommittees are A, budget, B, policy, C, transportation, D, long-range planning, E, negotiations, and F, regional agreement. Again, these are all subcommittees that are currently in place, but we wanted to have them written down for clarity. We also added number 7, through the discretion of the chair, an ad hoc committee may be formed as needed and will be composed of 2 members from each member community and not to exceed a quorum. Are there any questions on that?
That is in the form of a motion, Mrs. Holbrook?
Not yet.
We need the motion first.
Yes, that is in the form of a motion, Mr.
Do
Dolan.
I have a second? Second by Mr. Hammond. Any discussion on the main motion?
I have I don't know if this needs to be a change or an addition to this. So at the bottom, we do talk about ad hoc committees, so committees that we might create that we need to. So at the top, where we're adding all subcommittees will be composed of, it should be all subcommittees and or ad hoc committees will be composed of. Change that in there.
So that is in the form of a motion of an amendment to what Mrs. Holbrook has brought forward. Sure, yeah, you keep going. You've got more amendments, go for it.
Sorry. And then, so it should be all subcommittees and or ad hoc committees will be composed of no more than 2 members. Just, we don't want it to be more than 2. We're trying to keep things the same, so 2 members from each. And if we say no more than, could be less. Some committees only have 1 from each, 1 Raynham, 1 Bridgewater.
Very good, so then that is an amendment. So if I could, Ms. King, just to make sure I've captured that correctly, Ms. King's amendment would read fully, all subcommittees and ad hoc committees will be composed of no more than 2 members from each member community and will not exceed a quorum of the full committee. Is that?
And then at the bottom, can we just add that no more than at the bottom where it says will be composed of no more than 2 members.
So that is an amendment to number 7, adding no more before the number 2 on the policy. Okay, do I have a second on those amendments?
Second.
Second by Mr. Florence. Any discussion on the amendments? Seeing none. Again, we're voting just on the amendments first. Mr. Florence.
Aye.
Mr. Gelfi. Mr. Hammond. Aye. Mrs. Holbrook.
Aye.
Mrs. King.
Aye.
Mr. Marrera.
Aye.
Dr. Lewandowski.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Going back to the main motion, is there any discussion on the main motion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Again, this is now accepting policy BBE as of we just amended. Mr. Florence.
Aye.
Mr. Gelfi. Mr. Hammond. Aye. Mrs. Holbrook.
Aye.
Mrs. King.
Aye.
Mr. Marrera.
Aye.
Dr. Lewandowski.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, and tonight is the second reading of BR's policy AC harassment and policy AC-A sexual harassment. And due to the fact that it was a new policy, again, MASC has recommended we combine these 2 policies into one comprehensive policy, ACAB, harassment. Just as a side note, the housekeeping of adding Bridgewater Raynham Regional School District was added to page 4 of the policy, ACAB harassment, as well as the link to where people can find the Title IX coordinator information. So since this policy was in your January packet and the public was provided a copy of the policy at our last meeting, I would like to make a motion to waive the reading of policy ACAB harassment allowed due to the length of the policy.
We have a motion to waive the reading of ACAB. Do we have a second? Second by Ms. King. Any discussion on that motion to waive the reading of ACAB? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Florence.
Aye.
Mr. Gelfi. Mr. Hammond. Aye. Mrs. Holbrook.
Aye.
Mrs. King.
Aye.
Mr. Marrera.
Aye.
Dr. Lewandowski.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye.
Okay, so now I'd like to make a motion to combine BR's policy AC harassment and policy AC-A sexual harassment into one comprehensive policy to be renamed policy ACAB harassment.
Good. It's a motion by Mrs. Holbrook. Do we have a second? Second. Second by Mr. Hammond. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none. Mr. Florence.
Aye.
Mr. Gelfi. Mr. Hammond. Aye. Mrs. Holbrook.
Aye.
Mrs. King.
Aye.
Mr. Moreira.
Aye.
Dr. Freeman-Dowski.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Very good. That concludes your report, Mr. Holbrook.
That does conclude my report, Mr. Dolan.
Very good. Thank you very much. We have a technology report, Mr. Shaw.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the school committee, Superintendent Swenson. Recently, 3 networking infrastructure projects were completed throughout the district. These projects took place at Merrill Elementary, Williams Intermediate School, and Bridgewater Raynham Regional High School. I'll go over a brief description of each school, and I'll start with the Merrill School. The project included replacing all network switches in the building. Benefits of the new network switches include 10 gig versus 1 gig uplinks, reliability and speed. New 10 gig fiber was installed connecting the 2 network closets. 30 new Wi-Fi Generation 6 access points were installed throughout the building. Previously, there were only 12 Wi-Fi access points installed. This now gives the building 100% coverage, reliability, and increased speed. Next is the Williams Intermediate School. All network switches were replaced and 10 gig fiber was ran between network closets to improve the network backbone. 110 Wi-Fi access points replaced the previous 36. This greatly improves coverage in the building and wireless performance. These upgrades give us a peace of mind during MCAS testing and prepares us for a one-to-one or bring your own device environment. Last is the Bridgewater Raynham Regional High School. The network switches at the high school were original to when the building was built in 2007, 2008. They were unreliable and would need to be rebooted occasionally to provide consistent uptime. All network switches were replaced and now give us a reliable wired network. These projects were funded by the CVRF School Reopening Grant. The Williams project was sent to the town of Bridgewater for reimbursement. This concludes my report for this evening.
Any questions for Mr. Shaw? Mr. Swenson, do you have anything to add?
Just that those were huge, big ticket items that were in the 5-year technology improvement plan. And we were able to utilize some of our grant funding to kind of check the box on those projects. So just want to thank Mr. Shantz for his sense of urgency on that, because those are things that are going to help us offset future budgets in terms of technology by using that grant funding from this year. So thank you, Mr. Shantz.
Thank you. Up next, personnel report with Ms. Figueroa. I saw you earlier.
I'm here. Good evening, Chairman Dolan, Superintendent Swenson, and school committee members. We had one resignation. It was Nicole Litton, an ESP. There's an effective date of 3/12/2021. For retirements, we have Elaine Avani, grade 3 teacher at MES, effective 1/31/2022, after 35 years of service. Judith Roberts, special education teacher at RMS, effective 6/30/2021, 27 years of service. Mary Worsham, special education teacher, Williams Intermediate School, effective 6/30/2021, after 24 years of service. Brenda Shepard, ELA teacher at the high school, effective 6/30/2021, after 24 years of service. Natalie Windsor, special education teacher at the high school, effective 6/30/2021, after 37 years of service. Mary Dooley, guidance counselor at the high school, effective 6/30/2021, after 24 years of service. Lisa White, special education teacher, effective 8/10/2021 at the high school after 35 years of service. That concludes my report.
Thank you. And thank you to all of those teachers who've spent many of years in our district. We appreciate your dedication and service to our kids. That concludes our administrative and school committee reports. Up next, we have unfinished business, public comment conversation. This was a carryover from last month's meeting because of timing. We moved it to this month. We have obviously moved public comment as part of our policy that states we have to have at the beginning of meetings, policy BEDH. So that is where we're at. It was in the past at the end of the meeting, but with that policy, we have now moved it to the beginning. And we're here to talk about whether we want to leave it there, if we want to amend policy, if we want to.
Motion to move it to policy subcommittee for their recommendation to the full committee in March meeting.
Thank you.
We have a motion to move policy BEDH to review, to send it to the policy subcommittee for review, to make recommendations. I would ask the policy subcommittee come back with those recommendations and a recommendation on where on the agenda they feel public comment should be if they so choose. So Dr. Krewandowski, that's a motion?
It isn't, and well, no, I wasn't sure if you wanted to even include that update at our March 10th meeting as just a vote for the full committee, and then at the March meeting, it could be in whatever spot they suggest and is approved. If you want to put it as a special item on the.
Sorry, you said March 10th.
On the budget.
During the budget year?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you do it as a one item agenda.
Yeah, if they can meet and have it pulled together by then, we can look at this.
We meet March 9th.
Oh, you do? Okay. Good, that makes.
Perfect.
Okay. So that was a motion by Dr. Krewandowski. Do I have a second? Second. Second by Mr. Hammond. Any other discussion on that?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
It's me, Mr. Moreira, here from Zoom. I just wanted to make a quick comment here. I know there's a lot of talk about having this at the beginning of the meeting. I know years ago we had at the beginning of the meeting, and there were questions at the beginning of the meeting, comments that were eventually answered during the meeting, which is why it was moved to the end of the meeting. Just to put some of this in perspective, our public comment session, when we started our meeting, we had 161 people in the Zoom room as participants. I don't know how many people were live streaming. We are currently at 59 people left in the Zoom room. Over 100 people have dropped off, and a lot of those people dropped off before they even heard the reopening the reopening plan to full in person, which is a lot of the comments that were brought up in the beginning of the meeting. So I do believe there is value in having public comment towards the end so people can hear the meeting in its entirety. But I do also believe that we need to do a better job in managing our agenda because we are at 2 hours and 44 minutes. We're at 2:44 now at the regular meeting, not counting executive session that we all attended. It started at 6 p.m. So a lot of us are pushing 4 hours now, and we're still in old business. We haven't even got to the new business. So I would make a recommendation that we find a way to manage our agenda a little bit more wisely, knowing that parents do have to get their kids to bed. And I know in seeing all these other screens, we have seen children pop into the screens saying, to their parents they're going to bed. So I think we're doing an injustice to them as well. So we need to find a way to better manage it, even if it's during these tough times where we have long agendas, which is possibly having another school committee time that we meet maybe 2 weeks prior, 2 weeks later. I know the last meeting we talked about the budget, the presentation. That probably could have been done in its own timeline outside of the normal meeting, especially all the COVID stuff that we've been addressing on all the meetings. So that would be my recommendation going forward, is for us to manage our agenda a little bit more wisely. And hopefully we can bring that up at the policy subcommittee as a recommendation. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Ms. Moreira. Any other?
Just a comment.
Yes.
So, regarding public comment, it's tricky. I did read the many emails that we received about public comment, and I did read the minutes going back like 3 years to see where it was in the agenda at that time. And it has moved, like Mr. Dolan said, from the beginning of the agenda to the end of the agenda. It's usually around times where parents feel strongly about pay to ride or the budget. Sometimes it's at the beginning of the agenda and parents want to wait until the end because they want to be able to comment on what we have actually talked about or voted on, and they want us to hear their comments on what we've already discussed. Versus if it's at the beginning, they don't know what we're going to say or what we're going to present. And if it's at the end, there's always a different opinion of which is better. Right now, parents are saying they want it at the beginning, so we'll refer it to policy and we'll talk about that and make sure that the policy that we have is reconciled with what we're doing. But we didn't put it at the agenda, at the end of the agenda for those times, because we don't want to hear from parents. And like Mr. Murrah said, we get it. It's really late right now, and I know parents can't stay on a meeting for 3 hours waiting until the end. So that makes it difficult for parents. So we are mindful of our time and parents' time as well. So we will refer that to policy and talk about that. But it has been moved over the years from the beginning to the end, depending on what those parents at that time feel is better for them. So we've always been flexible with that, and we'll continue to be flexible.
Any other discussion before we go? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Plum. Aye. Mr. Gelfi. Mr. Hammond. Aye. Mrs. Fuller.
Aye.
Mr. King. Mrs. King. Sorry.
Aye.
Mr. Moreira.
Aye.
Dr. Prewitt.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. On to new business. We have the high school course selection. Ms. Watson.
Good evening, Chairman Dolan, members of the school committee, Superintendent Swenson. I am pleased to be here tonight. I'm seeking your approval for the following changes, which we wish to implement into our course selection booklet for next school year, which will be the 2021-2022 school year. As you know, we are in the process of phasing out our Algebra 2 Part A, Part B course. Last year, we eliminated Algebra 2 Part A. So for this upcoming school year, we will phase out the second half, which is Algebra 2 Part B. In its place, we have decided that it's actually better for the students to keep them in a traditional Algebra 2 full year course, but supplemented by creating 2 inclusion sections. So there's some special ed support there for our students. We would like to increase our offering for programming and design. It is currently being offered to students in grades 10 through 12. We'd like to expand that to include students in grades 9 through 12. We would like to take 2 semester courses that we're currently teaching in the science department, forensics and zoology, and expand them both to be full year courses instead of semester courses. We would like to introduce 2 new courses in our ELA department, which I'm very excited about. The first one, Diverse Voices in Literature, and the second one would be Film as Literature. And these would both be full year courses offered to juniors and seniors. We would like to expand our music exploration course, which is currently only offered to students in grade 9. And we'd like to offer that to students in grades 9 through 12. And last is PE and wellness. This pandemic didn't do, 100% terrible things. We got something good out of this year. We decided to take our PE and wellness this year, and we comboed it, and we made it a full year course for students in grades 9 and 10. Prior to that, students in grades 9 and 10 only had to take a semester of PE each year And during their sophomore year, they only received a semester of health. So now they're getting a PE and wellness full year course in grades 9 and 10. We'd like to continue that. So we're having great success with it. We'd like to continue that into next school year. The only other substantive change that we're seeking to make is actually based on DESE's recommendations that AP computer science principles be counted as either a math or a science course for students if they choose that. They don't have to choose that, but if they'd like it to count as one of their math or sciences, that is a recommendation coming from DESE. So we are seeking to allow that to happen. And that is all.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Watson. Mr. Swenson, do you have anything you want to add?
No, Ms. Watson continues to work with her staff to improve the educational program at the high school. In full support of all these changes moving into the 2021-2022 school year.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the changes to the course selection booklet at the high school as Ms. Watson has outlined?
So moved.
So we have a motion by Mrs. Holbrook. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Florence. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Florence?
Aye.
Mr. Gelfi? Mr. Hammond? Aye. Mrs. Holbrook?
Aye.
Mrs. King?
Aye.
Mr. Moreira?
Aye.
Dr. Krivandowski?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, we have our 2020-2021 extended school year dates with Ms. Medeiros.
Hi, good evening. And thank you, Chairman Dolan, school committee members, and Superintendent Swetson. I will be brief. We are just wanting to present from the special ed department our extended school year dates proposed for the coming summer. And our programming is generally a 5-week program, and we are looking to provide it from the dates of July 13th through August 13th. And again, there's a variety of programming that occurs within that time frame for the children who qualify for it. Does anyone have any questions regarding the dates?
Okay, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the dates of the extended school year program for the summer of 2021 for July 13th to August 13th. We have a motion. Motion by Mrs. King. Do I have a second? Second by Mr. Hammond. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote. Mr. Florence? Aye. Mr. Gelfen? Mr. Hammond? Aye. Mrs. Holbrook?
Aye.
Mrs. King?
Aye.
Mr. Moreira?
Aye.
Dr. Krivandowski?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Those are your dates, Ms. Medeiros.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Medeiros.
Up next, we have a vote to determine the school choice for the 2021-2022 school year with Ms. Macedo.
Yes, good evening, Chairman Dolan, members of the school committee, and Superintendent Swenson. I'm here to seek approval to continue with the school choice program in grades 9 through 12 for the 2021-22 school year. Included in my memo, you will see that there is a timeline as far as when we're going to receive and approve applications. Our deadline is going to be April 9th, 2021. And if we need to, if we have more applications than we have spaces for, we will conduct a lottery both in May and June, because as parents accept or decline, it may open up a second lottery that we'd need to do. So I'd like to move forward with getting approval for the school choice program.
Very good. I'll entertain a motion to approve the school choice program for the 2021-2022 school year as outlined by Ms. Macedo. So I have a motion by Mr. Hammond. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Holbrook. Mr. Swenson, do you want to add anything?
No, this is usually the time of the year that we ask for the vote. So we want to do it so we can proactively open up the process.
Very good. Yes. Dr. Prudhoe.
I'm typically in favor of school choice. I think it's wonderful. I know we have to maintain the students that are already involved, but do you feel with COVID that should we take a year hiatus, or do you feel that we should go forward and accept new kids where we're squished and busting at the seams?
Well, the thing is this, Dr. Primadowski, and the reason why we do it 9 through 12 is because each year we do lose students to parochials or vocationals and agricultural schools. So that usually offsets, those students that exit the district. We could keep a watchful eye out on, what we're envisioning being those students exiting and make sure we don't exceed the number, of those exiting versus those coming in. And as Mrs. Macedo said, if we then at that point have to have a lottery system in order to do that, we can.
Thank you.
That would be my recommendation, just because, again, we want to make sure we're offsetting those numbers and we have those monies coming into the district.
Very good. Any other questions? Yes, Warren.
Just to follow up with that, but if we don't have the space, because that's what it seemed like in our conversation today, if we don't have the space, I don't know how we can take the money, squeeze kids in if we can't fit them.
But again, Mr. Flores, you got to realize that we're going to have students exiting the district after their 8th grade year, that they end up going to private schools or, again, vocational agricultural schools. And, we can keep a watchful eye out to make sure that it's kind of a wash and we don't exceed, bringing in more kids than we can handle. I mean, it's up to the committee whether you want to not open up school choice this year, but I'm just saying that's pretty important funding that we utilize, especially around budget time. We could pay teachers' salaries at the high school out of that. That I would hate to limit that coffer. I mean, I don't know how Mrs. Macedo feels, but that would be my recommendation anyway.
As part of my memorandum, I did indicate that it will be at the discretion of administration to determine the number of students to be accepted in each grade based on space availability. So if we don't have the space, then we're not going to be able to do it. But we should move forward with the vote in case we do have the space.
Right.
I've just been handed a note by our fantastic recording secretary. If we do refuse to to offer school choice, we actually have to hold a public hearing to do so. I'm not advocating one way or the other. I'm just giving you all the information. So we do have a motion and a second to accept it. Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Murray.
So if I'm not mistaken, those students that do leave the district to go to other school districts, other types of schools, we do have to pay that outgoing student through their new district, correct? From our budget?
It comes from the Chapter 70 for any student that school choice is out and goes to another school system, or those monies from our Chapter 70 go with wherever that student is going. As far as students who are going to the vocational schools, again, those monies are going to the vocational schools and the agricultural schools.
So this is pretty much.
We don't get Chapter 70 on those students when they leave.
So this is pretty much just an offset to try to keep what we would normally be getting. So we're not.
And you typically have had, I think the most in a given year, 20 students, new students that come in. And at the high school, it's a little bit easier to put kids in classes there with all the different sections that run.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none. This is we're voting to approve the allowing of school choice for the 2021-2022 academic year. Mr. Florence.
Aye.
Mr. Gelf.
Aye.
Mr. Hammond. Aye. Mrs. Holbrook.
Aye.
Mrs. King.
Aye.
Mr. Moreira.
Aye.
Dr. Lewandowski,
No.
chair votes aye. That's 8 in favor, I'm sorry, 7 in favor, 1 against, the motion passes. Up next, thank you, Ms. Macedo.
Thank
Up
you.
next, we have the proposal of the school calendar, first reading. Again, this is the first reading. This does not require a vote tonight. Mr. Powers, the floor is yours again.
Thank you, Chairman Dolan, Mr. Swenson, members of the school committee. I did want to share with you tonight the first draft of our 21-22 academic year calendar. You actually have 2 documents I shared with you this evening. The second is the calendar of important events. Just in the essence of time, I'm more than happy to review that. That is more somewhat, it can be, I guess, altered at really any time. Those dates are term end dates, open house dates, where we certainly base that information on current data. As you know, last year we had to make all sorts of changes to that. I'm happy to go over it with you tonight, but I know obviously the big one is really the academic calendar in terms of first day of school, last day of school. So I will, proceed as you wish, but I will certainly start with our 21-22 draft calendar. We are currently at this point have every intention of kind of following our traditional model of starting our teachers back before Labor Day. Right now we are scheduled to start the school year on August 31st with our first day back convocation, opening ceremonies, and then obviously building-based activities. We will have 2 days of professional development, September 1st and September 2nd. We, as you know, have 184 days built in, so we typically have 3 days of professional development, and I'll talk to you about that third in a minute as the school year goes on. As you know, we have Friday, the 3rd of the Friday before Labor Day, and then obviously Monday to Labor Day are days off. And so we would then welcome back our grades 1 through 12 students on Tuesday, September 7th, and then our pre-K students back on Wednesday, the 8th. And that really kind of brings us through September. If you're looking at October, the first blue Wednesday in October would be an early release for professional development. I truly appreciate the fact that school committee has incrementally over time increased the number of early release days for professional development. Typically we have them before a holiday break or some other type of event or for parent teacher conferences. But I cannot stress how important these days have really become. And certainly we already have a kind of these days booked up for next year. Obviously we know there are potential dates, but we've already worked with our DEI consultants to potentially schedule some time for our staff throughout the school year. So it's not just, front loading our PD and then never revisiting it. We plan to offer some professional development at the beginning of the year and then continue to follow up on that throughout the school year. So right now, the 6th would be an early release day, pre-K to 12 for professional development. October 27th would be an early release day, currently for our pre-K to 8 students to have parent-teacher conferences and our 9 through 12 students to have an early release day for professional development. As you know, as part of NEASC a few years ago, they were required to offer additional common planning hours as part of that. On this calendar, I did just highlight some dates. I will certainly, in the past have tried to do this with different color-coded schemes for you just so you have the visual, but I will remove these from the final calendar if you wish. You can see a star in early November. That just simply indicates the end of the quarter at the high school. So that's 45 days, just so you have a visual of when that would be. But we typically take off those symbols for the final calendar. Obviously, the 11th is when Veterans Day is observed. And then that brings us to the 24th, which would be an early release day before the Thanksgiving recess, which obviously schools and offices are closed on the 25th and 26th. That brings us into December. The December 3rd is indicative of the end of the first trimester for our K-8 students. Wednesday, December 8th would be an early release day again for professional development. The 23rd is a contractual early release day before winter vacation. And obviously schools are closed from the 24th through the 31st, and students would return on January 3rd. In January, we do have the 17th off in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. That is always the third Monday in January. And again, the star just indicates the end of the second quarter at the high school. In February, we're proposing that Wednesday the 9th is another early release day, again for professional development. And then obviously that brings us into February vacation, our traditional February vacation, the 21st through the 25th. Excuse me. In March, again, we're proposing, March, we've traditionally had the last few years 2 early release days, one for professional development, which would be March 2nd, which typically ties in with MCAS. So we've utilized the early release day in the beginning of the month to do all of our MCAS training for our staff. And then the 23rd would be for parent-teacher conferences as well. That brings us into April. And again, the star just indicates the end of the third quarter at the high school. And then you can see Friday, April 15th is a no school day because it's Good Friday, but that also flows right into April school vacation. And that brings us to May. Again, we're proposing an additional early release day in May on May 18th. As you know, we have the 30th would be Memorial Day. So schools and offices would be closed on the 30th. And that brings us into June. I will talk about the end of the school first, and then a potential proposal that we had actually already talked about a year or so ago. And then certainly the pandemic threw a change into that. So right now, as you know, we have to prepare 2 end dates. One is the requirement of 180 days of school. And then the second one is 185 days of school. As I say every year, that 185 days is somewhat subjective because, if we have only 1 snow day, we still have to make up that 1 snow day. Sometimes it's somewhat confusing for parents that don't really understand. They think that because we have 5 snow days built in, if we have a snow day, we don't have to make it up. That's not really true. We have to have that 185, by regulation, the 185 days scheduled, but we still have to make up any day over the 180. And if we go beyond the 185, that's fine as well. So we could have 6 snow days and we're still required to make up 6 snow days. So that 185 number is somewhat confusing, and obviously it's a moving target. So with 180 days of school, that would bring us to June 16th. And 185 days would bring us to June 24th. Now, a couple things to note. We're actually proposing for this year, scheduling one of our 184 days, contractual days for teachers at the end of the school year. So students' last day of school would be Thursday, the 16th, and we would hold a teacher day on the 17th. The reason being is obviously this is next summer. Summer of 2022 is when we would be opening the new Mitchell school. So teachers are going to, need time to pack up their classrooms, get ready for that summer move. And it's not just the Mitchell staff. As we've said all along, almost every building is impacted by the opening of the new school. The high school is impacted because 8th grade is moving out. Williams is impacted because 7th grade is moving out, as well as 6th grade, and 3rd grade is moving over. Obviously, the Mitchell is impacted. The only 2 buildings that really are not impacted are Merrill and La Liberty. Even Raynham Middle School is impacted because preschool is over there. So, at that point, 5 out of our 7 buildings are involved in some type of move that will require packing up. So we are proposing to use that day to allow teachers to pack up their classrooms, get everything ready. That's certainly not to say that, they won't be packing up prior, but at least we've given them a full day to put the final touches on their classroom, have everything boxed up, so that way, whatever the process is, the moving company that comes in can just go ahead and move those boxes. So again, obviously that's a little bit of a moving target. So if we have a snow day at the end of the year, that pushes back the last day for students, and then obviously would push back the last day for teachers. So everything would move as one. Now, new this year, as you know, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has adopted Juneteenth as a state holiday. The regulations for state holidays, when they fall on a Sunday, they are observed on a Monday. So June 19th is a Sunday, so Juneteenth would fall on that Sunday, so it would be observed on the Monday. So at this point, it would be a no school day. It's a state holiday, so schools and offices would be closed. And so we would observe that if we still are in school. So I put that there, and that's why you see that if, we did have a snow day or 2 snow days, we actually wouldn't be coming back on that Monday. So for example, if, we have 2 snow days, we wouldn't actually be coming back until the 21st. So I hope that's not too confusing, but I at least wanted it to be on the calendar to start. Now, to go back a few days, if you recall, last year, which seems forever ago, we had proposed ending kindergarten and preschool 5 days early from all other students for the purposes of preschool and kindergarten screening. The way it currently has been done in the past is that we hire substitutes at the end of the year to do that. So they cover the kindergarten classrooms, cover the preschool classrooms. One of the issues, especially at the kindergarten level, that we were running into, when we run screening, teachers are involved in that. So on any given day, we may be looking at, 10 to 15, trying to secure 10 to 15 substitutes. It doesn't always happen. So we would run into problems where, some teachers they were scheduled to be involved in screening and then they weren't able to. And then even if we did get a substitute, again, it's still a substitute covering a class. The teacher was not there. So the proposal, and this does, happen in other districts, was to release the kindergarten and preschool students 5 days early for the purposes of screening. So their school year would end, and then the teachers and staff associated with kindergarten would be involved in preschool and kindergarten screening. I certainly know, given this last year, any less days on time on learning is not advantageous. So I'm somewhat hesitant to propose this, but in terms of logistically and operationally, this is our best bet, and even in cost effective wise. This past year, we actually screened the students over the summer. It was several $1,000s. I want to say it was almost $12,000 to $15,000 to bring our teachers back during the summer to screening kindergartners, enrolling kindergartners. We're either paying that for subs to cover the classes those last few weeks of school, or we're paying for it to happen during the summer. So this is, again, a cost avoidance measure, but I also do understand, the concern maybe around less days, just given, the current pandemic. Obviously, our incoming kindergartners are not affected by that, and for the most part, neither are our preschool students. So, there is that factor as well. They necessarily haven't been negatively impacted because they're new students to the district, but I also understand the perception of offering less instructional days. So again, that is an overview of the draft academic calendar. Again, as I stated, you should have a copy of that second sheet. I'm happy to go over it, but it really is, and those are somewhat arbitrary and subject to change, especially once we get additional DESE guidance about, if we have to make any modifications, go from 180 back to 170. Not that I anticipate that, but that certainly threw a huge wrench into the calendar. So I'm happy to go over it, but those dates are subject to change anyways, and don't necessarily require your approval, but certainly the calendar, the start and end of school does.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Powers. Again, this was the first meeting. The one note I have, Mr. Powers, the third line down, September 4th through 6th. I believe that should be September 3rd.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Dolan.
No problem. Is there any, yes, Dr. Rubendowski is waving her hand.
No, I'm tired. I am not a fan of the 5 half days. I see the ones that are early release pre-K conferences. I get that. 5 days for a working family, half day is tough. I would rather see you combine a couple of those and maybe do the Monday after the Super Bowl as a professional development and let the families have it off. I'm just throwing that out there as a suggestion. But I'm really, seriously, I'm not a great fan of those 5 half days. I just think it's very disruptive, and I understand the need for it, but I would rather consolidate it to not be so many half days. That's all. Thank you.
Any other questions, Mr. Powers? Okay, we will have this again next month for its second.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Acceptance of gifts. Mr. Swenson.
Yes, thank you, everybody. As we usually do it, I will read all the gifts and then ask for a vote of consensus at the end for all of these very generous donations. First, we have from Exxon Mobil. We have a STEM grant for $500 for the Williams Intermediate School. Then we have Harvard Pilgrim grant donated by Danielle Baker to the George Mitchell Elementary School in the amount of $500. So those are our two acceptance of gifts for our February meeting.
Very good. Do we have a motion to accept those gifts?
So moved.
We have a motion by Mrs. Solberg. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Hammond. This does require a roll call vote. Mr. Florence.
Aye.
Mr. Gelfi. Aye. Mr. Hammond. Aye. Mrs. Solberg.
Aye.
Mrs. King.
Aye.
Mr. Moreira.
Aye.
Dr. Freeman-Dowski.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Going on to approval of payroll warrants, I will excuse myself as my wife works for the district and chair oversees.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. I would like to call for a motion to approve the payroll warrant dated January 28th, 2021 and February 11th, 2021. Can I have a motion? All right, and can I have a second, please?
Second.
I will take a roll call vote. Mr. Florence?
Aye.
Mr. Gelfi? Mr. Hammond?
Aye.
Mrs. Holbrook?
Aye.
Mr. Moreira?
Aye.
Dr. Freeman-Dowski?
Aye.
And the vice chair votes aye. I will return the meeting to Mr. Dolan.
Thank you, Mrs. King. Moving on to general ledger warrants. Entertain a motion to approve the general ledger warrants for January 28th, 2021 and February 11th, 2021. Motion made by Mrs. King. Do I have a second? Second. Second by Mr. Florence. This does require a roll call vote. Mr. Florence. Aye. Mr. Gelfi. Mr. Hammond. Aye. Mrs. Holbrook.
Aye.
Mrs. King.
Aye.
Mr. Moreira.
Aye.
Dr. Freeman-Dowski.
Aye.
The chair votes aye. Finally, we have no other business. Announcements and items to be considered for future agendas. Anybody have anything?
I just want to say at the March meeting, I, along with Mr. Gelfi, will bring forward a resolution in support of suspending MCAS for the remainder of the school year.
Very good. We look forward to that. That at the March meeting. Any other announcements? Our March regularly scheduled meeting is March 24th, but just as a reminder, on March 10th, we have our budget public hearing. We look forward to hearing Dr. Freeman-Dowski present that. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 10:18 p.m.
So moved.
I have a motion by Mrs. Florence. Do I have a second? Second by Mrs. King. Roll call vote. Mr. Florence. Aye. Mr. Gelfi. Aye. Mr. Hammond. Aye. Mrs. Holbrook.
Aye.
Mrs. King.
Aye.
Mr. Moreira.
Aye.
Dr. Freeman-Dowski.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. We are adjourned. Thanks, folks. Have a good night.
Everybody.